Chapter 432. In a small alley, more than 10 people were gathered there. The surrounding pedestrians stuck their heads out to take a look, but when they saw the ferocious man glaring at them, they hurriedly lowered their heads and left. What happened? A burly man with a full beard and floral embroidery on his body asked in a deep voice. He was wearing a sleeveless jacket and a pleated skirt. Pleated skirts were the traditional clothing of the remnant citizens of the Hound Nation, regardless of gender. I don't know, we just arrived too. The others shook their heads. They only rushed here after hearing the noise. Who's dead? The corpses scattered in the alley were no longer recognizable. They were like rags, and some of their limbs were nowhere to be found. It's Two-Headed Snake. I saw him come in just now, a 15 or 16-year-old youth said from not far away. He went to the streets to work just now. He should have succeeded, but I don't know how he became like this. The youth looked a little fearful. Although he was young, he had seen many life and death situations. Last month, there was a man about his age who stole from the father of a Nine-Blade sect disciple. In the end, he was tied to a horse and dragged to death outside the city. He saw it with his own eyes. Logically speaking, he should be used to seeing dead people and shouldn't show such an expression. The reason why he showed such an expression was because he could see clearly that no one had entered the alley. Just now, he secretly followed behind the Two-Headed Snake to see if he had obtained anything good. He didn't expect to hear a thunderous sound coming from inside the alley as soon as he reached the mouth of the alley. Then he saw the corpse. There was a strange smell in the air. From the beginning to the end, he didn't see anyone else. Subsequently, he told everyone about what he saw. Everyone was puzzled. Since no one else appeared, how did Two-Headed Snake die? Look at the wall. Someone suddenly pointed at the wall and shouted. There were many small holes in the surrounding wall. Because of the explosion of the grenade, the wall was slightly damaged. The traces of these fragments entering the wall were not easy to be discovered. Very quickly, everyone dug out some fragments from the wall. However, everyone still couldn't figure out what exactly happened. This was because grenades were beyond their knowledge. Check if there are any suspicious people in the city, the burly man said. They had to figure out what exactly happened first. At this moment, Rinpoche was eating noodles. After staying in Dayo for so long, he could finally eat noodles. There was a small restaurant by the street. When he entered, he saw two people eating noodles there. Rinpoche pointed in their direction and said, "Give me a portion as well." The noodles were not very delicious. They were sour and spicy, and the taste was a little strange. However, he was satisfied to be able to eat noodles in this place. On the way back, Lin Shaola suddenly stretched out her hand at lightning speed and grabbed the hand of a young man in his 20s. Her eyes were blazing. She could tolerate stealing Rinpoche's wallet, but she absolutely couldn't tolerate stealing his bag of sweets. She had been eyeing it for a long time, but he actually dared to stretch his claws out? Ouch, ouch, it's broken. The young man behind Rinpoche had a pained look on his face as Lin Shaola grabbed his wrist. His eyes darted left and right as he tried to find a way to escape. "He stole from you." Lin Shaola frowned. Although she had caught him, she didn't know how to deal with him. She spent most of her time in Qingxin Palace Hall. The 2 times she came out, she followed Rinpoche. Now that she encountered such a situation, she didn't know what to do. Rinpoche grabbed the young man's clothes and dragged him into a nearby alley. "How do you think I should deal with you? Should I break your hand or your leg?" Rinpoche asked calmly as he pressed the young man against the wall. He wasn't going to cause trouble this time around. He was only going to investigate, but that didn't mean that he could tolerate anything. After stealing a money bag, he still wanted to steal a bag of sweets. Moreover, he even wanted to fleece a sheep. Do you think I'm easy to bully? In any case, I'm a man-will expert. Are you from another place? Let me tell you, I'm from the Death Toad. You'd better let me go, and I definitely won't find trouble with you. Otherwise, we have 800 brothers. No matter how good the 2 of you are, you won't be able to walk out of Longzhou City. The young man rolled his eyes and revealed a ferocious expression. In his line of work, one had to have good eyesight. Otherwise, if he provoked someone he shouldn't provoke, he wouldn't even be able to keep his life. From the moment the 2 of them left the restaurant, he had been watching them. With one look, he could tell that they weren't locals. Outsiders were unfamiliar with this place. Generally, it was better to have one less thing to do. Therefore, the moment he opened his mouth, he scared the two of them. 800 brothers? So scary. Ren Baqian smiled faintly as he held the other party's hand. This hand is quite beautiful. One look and I can tell that you didn't do much work. There aren't even any calluses. It's rare for a man to have such a hand. Looking at Ren Baqian's expression, the young man immediately felt that he was in trouble. Snap! The young man's index finger was pressed against the back of his hand. The young man let out a miserable howl. This looks much more pleasing to the eye. Ren Baqian lowered his head and looked at the young man who was bending over and holding his finger as he howled miserably. Next time, watch your eyes more carefully, Ren Baqian said and walked out of the alley unhurriedly. That's it. Lin Shala followed beside Ren Baqian and asked softly, "What else can I do?" Ren Baqian asked. After all, he wasn't here to stir up trouble. Punishing without teaching is called torture. I saw this in the ancient books. Lin Shala was puzzled. Ren Baqian turned his head and looked at her as if she was an alien. Why? Is there something wrong with the ancient books? Lin Shala asked doubtfully. You are right. Ren Baqian agreed. Let's go back. He brought Lin Shala back to the vicinity of the alley and happened to see that person walking out. When he saw the two of them, he immediately shuddered. Ren Baqian grabbed his chest and pulled him back into the alley. Sir, you're a magnanimous person. Don't lower yourself to my level. The young man was scared out of his wits when he saw the two of them. He quickly begged for mercy and didn't forget to wave his fingers in front of Ren Baqian. Do you know what you did wrong? Ren Baqian asked. I know. I was blind and offended the two of you. I won't dare to do it again. The young man quickly begged for mercy. If you make a mistake, you'll be punished. If you get beaten, you'll have to stand up straight. It's hard to break an earthen jar without leaving the well. You'll have to pay for what you've done sooner or later. Tell me, of all the things you could have done at your age, why did you come out to steal? If he was caught, wouldn't he be beaten to death if he met a ruthless person? Not everyone is as easy to talk to as me. The young man scowled. Was the person in front of him crazy? He had already left, yet he still came back to teach him a lesson. Moreover, this was breaking one of his fingers. Do you have some misunderstanding about the word easy to talk to? He was either talkative or easy to talk to. Can you let me go and let me go to the medicine shop to take a look at my finger? I still have to rely on this finger to eat. Are you convinced by what I said? Ren Baqian's saliva flew all over the place before he finally asked this question. I accept. I will turn over a new leaf when I go back, the young man scowled. Come, let me take a look at your finger. This one is broken. How did it become like this? It's not symmetrical. Ren Baqian grabbed the young man's hand, and the young man suddenly trembled in fear. Crack! Along with the crisp sound of bones breaking, the middle finger was also attached to the back of his hand. Punishing without teaching is called abuse. I taught without punishing and spared your life. Ren Baqian let go of the young man, feeling very satisfied. Teaching without punishing means that evil people won't be punished. Lin Shala added. The young man's face turned green when he heard this. Must the two of you kill me? How could this little girl be so ruthless? Forget it. It's fine as long as you taught him. Let's not kill him. He's just trying to make a living. Who would do this if they could do something else? It's not easy for him. Ren Baqian looked kind. Oh, Lin Shala nodded. After the two of them left, the young man looked at his two fingers that were attached to the back of his hand with a pale face. Mother of asterisk her, I met a lunatic. I wonder if these two fingers can be reattached. The young man's hands were wrapped in cloth as he dragged his legs home. He was really unlucky today and didn't know if he could take revenge. Street crossing rat. How did you end up like this? Not long after he returned to his shabby house, a young man came looking for him. Don't mention it. When this matter was brought up, he was covered in snot and tears. Although it was common for him to be beaten up when he was caught as a thief, today's incident made him feel aggrieved. Were these two crazy people? Did you see any strange people in the city? That person asked when he saw that the young man didn't want to talk about it. Half Mountain Flower instructed us to report any suspicious or strange strangers. Half Mountain Flower was the boss of this area and was in charge of more than 20 pickpockets. Street crossing rat's eyes lit up when he heard this. Weren't these two strangers today? Furthermore, they were two crazy people. He could finally take revenge. One had to know that Half Mountain Flower was a man-wheel expert, and his leader was even an earth-wheel expert. Although these two people had some martial arts at their age, how good could their martial arts be? He didn't believe that they would be able to get away with their leader. In his heart, an earth-wheel expert was already the most powerful person. He could even go to a brothel with two little girls, one in front and the other pushing him from the back. Also, that little girl was so beautiful, but her heart was actually so ruthless. He didn't know how the leader would deal with her. Chapter 433. At night, at the ULI Inn, his son was preparing to close for the day. Although the city gates were open all night, there was basically no one around at this time. When he closed the door and turned around, he felt that his eyes were blurry and quickly rubbed them. There was clearly no one in the lobby just now, but now there was a burly man standing in front of the counter. "Bee Sting, are there any suspicious strangers?" The burly man had a square face, thick eyebrows, and big eyes. He was considered dignified and tall. Although he was not as tall as the Aboriginals, he was slightly taller than the ordinary remnant citizens of the Hound Nation. "Hey, if it isn't Owner Lin, why are you here today?" The lady boss saw the man in front of her and immediately put on a smile. At the same time, she was thinking, is this fellow looking for strangers? Who is he looking for? The two people upstairs? No matter where there was light, there would be darkness. There would always be places where light couldn't reach. There is only one underground force in Longzhou City, the Death Toad. The man in front of her was called Lin Yuan, the deputy chief of the Death Toad. It was said that he was much more powerful than the chief. However, his life had been saved by the chief, and he had always been the deputy. Even though he was more powerful than the Death Toad, he had not been disloyal and was considered a trustworthy person. In Longzhou City, he could be considered a well-known figure. Although the Death Toad gang had gathered a group of ruffians, which made people look down on them, the Death Toad and Lin Yuan's martial arts were solid. Even a Nine-Blade sect would not provoke them. I'll leave after asking a few questions. You, Bee Sting, are really free and unfettered in such a place. I'm afraid that the people below don't understand etiquette, so I came to ask them personally, Lin Yuan said in a deep voice. "Oh, it can't be a small matter to trouble Owner Lin, right? I don't know why you're making such a fuss," the lady boss said softly as she leaned against the counter. "Just tell me if there are any. A man and a woman, and they are both young," Lin Yuan said in a deep voice. "You know my rules." The lady boss glanced at the second floor and rolled her eyes. "I understand. Thank you." Lin Yuan cupped his fists. He understood what Bee Sting meant. Her rules were that no one could cause trouble in the store. No one could touch her customers in the store. "What's his background?" Lin Yuan lowered his voice. "If you can make me feel that you're stronger than that dead man of mine, I'll tell you everything." The lady boss moved her body and sat on the bar counter. She placed a hand on Lin Yuan's shoulder and said softly. Lin Yuan took a step back and said, "You must be joking. Bee Needle, Jade Knife, I can't afford to provoke the two of you. Are you looking down on me because I'm getting old?" The lady boss said faintly, her eyes moving about, seducing one's soul. Lin Yuan's heart skipped a beat, but he quickly suppressed it. The green snake's mouth, the wasp's stinger. From the name of the flower, one could tell who she was. Those who wanted to get intimate with her, but ended up losing their lives, were like carps crossing the river. It was said that a young master from a city lord's family in the north had died. He had been skinned alive. His skin had been peeled off, stuffed with straw, and the meat had been made into buns. After that, she was exposed, so she had no choice but to escape here. After she escaped, it was said that dozens of puppets made of human skin stuffed with straw were found. Therefore, she also had a flower name, Pai Wang. "Look at your guts." The lady boss stretched out her finger and drew a circle in front of him. "Although I'm gutsy, I know what I can touch and what I can't." Lin Yuan squeezed out a smile. The lady boss grabbed his clothes and pulled him in front of her. She blew into his ear and whispered, "They said they are merchants from the Yun Nation. However, I didn't see any goods, thank you." Lin Yuan quickly took a few steps back, cupped his hands at her, and disappeared into the night. The lady boss looked at his disappearing figure and sneered. It would be a good thing if someone could help her find out what was going on. Ren Baqian naturally didn't know that he had been targeted as soon as he arrived in Longzhou City. Furthermore, it wasn't just one group of people. Previously, he had repeatedly exhorted the students not to get into trouble. He didn't expect that nothing would happen to the students, but he himself would be targeted. The night passed. The next morning, when he opened the door, a fragrant body threw itself into his arms. A soft and seductive cry of surprise sounded. Ren Baqian quickly raised his hands to block the other party and grabbed a couple of handfuls. It felt pretty good. Are you all right? Ren Baqian pretended that he didn't notice anything as he helped the lady who threw herself into his arms. I wanted to ask if you wanted breakfast. I didn't expect to slip and bump into you. The lady boss's face was flushed, and she pushed her chest forward. When she stood up, she gently brushed her hands over Ren Baqian's body. Ren Baqian savored the feeling, and his expression didn't change at all. It's good that you're all right. Prepare breakfast for 2 more. After sending the lady boss off, Ren Baqian squinted his eyes. It was such a coincidence that she bumped into him as soon as he opened the door. Longzhou City wasn't big, but there were many demons and monsters. It was much more interesting to come out than to stay in the palace. There was more of a Jianghu flavor. Staying in the palace or beside the Empress wasn't as exciting. The Jianghu was a place that all men yearned for. It was full of coquettish young married women, unmarried heroines, and cross-dressing beggars. As his mind wandered, he walked to the room next door and pushed the door open. Lin Shaola was sprawled out on the bed, drooling. She was wearing a thin white tube top and shorts that were almost sticking to her body. Ren Baqian confirmed that her flat figure wasn't as developed as his chest muscles. This was such a sad story. Wake up, the sun is shining on your butt. Ren Baqian stood by the bed and shouted. There was no response. It's time to eat. Oh, where? Lin Shaola immediately sat up with hazy eyes. Put on your clothes. Let's go downstairs to eat. After eating, Ren Baqian put 2 grenades in his pocket and continued to walk around with Lin Shaola. Along the way, he bought a money bag, stuffed a grenade into it, and hung the money bag on his waist. The 2 of them walked around for the whole morning from the north to the south of the city. Along the way, they inquired about their group of students. After all, with so many Aboriginal youths, it was quite conspicuous and easy to find out about them. When he entered the city yesterday, they were still in the city and had only left the city this morning. At the same time, 5 disciples of the 9 Blades sect rode into the city ostentatiously on short horses. Let's drink and rest first. We will go to work in the afternoon, one of the youths said to everyone. One of the young men said to the crowd. Everyone immediately responded and shouted, Xiao Yuan, you should be the one paying for this drink. No problem. That youth smiled and led everyone into a restaurant by the roadside. After everyone had eaten and drunk their fill, the youth brushed past someone as he walked down the stairs. There was a slip of paper in his hand. He took a glance at the note when no one was paying attention and immediately understood. Not long after Ren Baqian and Lin Shaola left the restaurant, they saw the crowd in front of them becoming a little chaotic as they moved to both sides. There was the sound of hurried hooves as 5 disciples of the 9 Blades sect galloped along the road while shouting, Make way, make way. Ren Baqian and Lin Shaola stood by the roadside indifferently and waited for the horses to pass. He didn't expect one of the horses to charge toward them. The youth on the horse shouted, The horse is out of control. Make way, make way. Chapter 434. He did it on purpose, Lin Shaola replied quickly. Ren Baqian felt that something was amiss even without Lin Shaola's reminder. It was too much of a coincidence that so many people were charging at them, just like in the morning. Kill the horse and leave the person behind. While they were talking, the horse was only 3 meters away from Ren Baqian. Ren Baqian could feel the wind from the galloping horse on his face. A small figure appeared in front of Ren Baqian, raised its paw, and slapped at the horse. The surrounding people immediately exclaimed. Although the dwarf horse wasn't tall, it was strong and could kill a person. Lin Shaola, who was in front of Ren Baqian, looked thin and weak. It was as if a gust of wind could blow her away, let alone being hit by a horse. Everyone could almost see the scene of her being hit by the horse. Thump! As Lin Shaola slapped the horse's head with her delicate palm, the horse fell to the ground as if it had hit a wall. The person on the horse also flew into the air and barely managed to twist his body in midair before falling into the shop next door. When the other riders saw the situation, they immediately surrounded the shop. One of them shouted toward the shop, "Xiaoyuan, is something the matter?" After realizing that the horse was dead, someone shouted angrily at Lin Shaola. "Although it's Yuan's fault for losing control of the horse, don't you think you've gone too far?" They clearly saw how Lin Shaola killed the horse with one slap. To kill a galloping horse with one slap, one needed to be at least at the man-will level. However, to make the galloping horse stop moving as if it had hit a wall without moving at all was something that even their master couldn't do. Although this horse was a dwarf horse, it weighed 250 kilograms. Coupled with the impact of the galloping horse, even an intermediate man-wheel expert couldn't remain motionless. This girl, who looked much younger than them, was actually so highly skilled. This made them speak more politely to her. However, they weren't alone. There was still the Nine-Blade sect behind them, so they had to demand an explanation no matter what. "He was the one who hit me." After hearing her reply, Rinpoche raised his head and said faintly, "My servant girl was afraid that he would hit me, so she used a little more force." "You are the servant girl. You are the servant girl." Lin Shaola was immediately unhappy when she heard that. "If I'm not a servant girl, then what am I?" Rinpoche asked. "Bodyguard." Lin Shaola was very firm about her identity. "A maid or a bodyguard?" Rinpoche held a lollipop in his hand. Lin Shaola hesitated for a moment, but she still didn't give in. "Bodyguard." There was another one in Rinpoche's hands. "Servant girl it is." Lin Shaola smiled and grabbed the lollipop. The rest of the people watched him coax the child with a lollipop. It was hard to imagine that this girl, who could be easily bribed, was actually so skilled. "Sir, although I'm also at fault in this matter, don't you think you're going a little overboard? With your skills, you clearly could have dodged it, yet you wanted to kill my horse. Isn't this inexcusable? We are disciples of the Nine-Blade sect. Although we aren't a big sect, we can't let people bully us like this," the young man named Xiaoyuan said as he walked out of the shop with a dejected expression. "Speaking of which, I still want to ask you, why did it have to bump into us on such a wide road?" Rinpoche squinted his eyes and looked over. "Naturally, the horse went out of control. This isn't something I can control. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened." The young man's eyes flickered. "What a coincidence." Rinpoche laughed mischievously. "Why don't the two of you leave your names? It will be easier for us to explain today's incident when we return. After all, horses are precious. This horse belongs to the sect and is very valuable," the young man said. "Names? Even if I tell you, you won't know. We are not from here and are not here to cause trouble. This thing is for you as compensation." Rinpoche took out a dark green ball and threw it to the young man. "What's this?" The young man took it and looked at it carefully. It was a dark green ball with a raised lattice, a ring, and a metal strip. "Good stuff. Its value is much higher than your horse's. As for its use, I can't tell you. After all, this thing isn't something you should have." Rinpoche laughed, ignored them, and left with Lin Shaola. "Seniors, let them go." The young man held the ball in his hand and said, "That horse." One of them was somewhat unwilling. After all, a dwarf horse was considered precious to them. If they let them go just like that, they wouldn't be able to explain themselves when they returned. The five of them only had enough pocket money to buy one horse for a year. "He's an expert. Go back and tell Master about this matter. I believe he won't blame us. After all, the horse that I was riding on went out of control. If there's any responsibility, I will bear it alone. There's no need to trouble senior brothers." The young man squeezed out a smile. After hearing what he said, everyone stopped talking. However, they were somewhat embarrassed. After all, they were from the same sect. "What did he give you?" someone asked curiously. "This ball looks quite exquisite. I wonder what it's used for. What's this metal strip? It looks like it's holding a handle. There's a ring? Pull it and see. Maybe it can open." The few of them gathered around to look at the ball that Rinpoche gave them. After all, even a bodyguard was such an expert. She was so young and pretty, although a little flat. Presumably, the identity of such a person wasn't ordinary. What he gave them wouldn't be ordinary either. Ed, did you pull the ring down? Did you damage it? Let's see if we can open it. Maybe there's something inside. Boom. Hearing the explosion coming from behind, Rin Baqian couldn't help but say, "Curiosity killed the cat." "What did you give them?" Lin Xiaola couldn't help but ask. If there were guards here, they would definitely know what Rin Baqian gave them. However, she had been sleeping in the city and naturally didn't recognize a grenade. It's just a small thing. Punishing without teaching is torture, Lin Xiaola reiterated. There's no chance to punish them, even if I wanted to, Rin Baqian replied. Then, he thought for a while and said, It seems like we're being targeted. Forget it. We have a rough idea of the situation here. Now that something like this has happened, we can't stay here anymore. Let's go to other cities to take a look. After all, it was an entrance city. It was too close to Goose City and couldn't come into contact with too many things. If he wanted to see more, he had to go deeper. Sir, why are you in such a hurry to leave? If we set off now, I'm afraid we will have to spend the night on the road. When the lady boss heard that Rin Baqian wanted to check out, she was a little surprised. She didn't know what he had encountered outside. The public security here isn't very good. It's not suitable for me to stay. Rin Baqian smiled. How can that be? The lady boss was even more surprised. Longzhou City's public security is famous. After all, there's so many merchants coming and going. If the public security wasn't good, there would have been chaos. Maybe the public security here has worsened after I came here, Rin Baqian thought to himself, but didn't say it out loud. An hour later, the two of them sat in an ox cart and left the south gate. It's confirmed that it's him. Should we chase after him? A few people stood at the city gate and looked at the ox cart in front. Everyone else looked at the two people in front. Brother Lin, what do you think? The man at the front asked. There's no need to provoke him. That girl is at least an earthwill expert. With such skills at such a young age, her background isn't simple, Lin Yuan said in a deep voice. It wasn't wise to provoke such a person just because of a subordinate's interference. Furthermore, even if we don't chase after him, the Nine-Blade sect won't let this matter rest, Lin Yuan added. Speaking of this matter, the man at the side felt a little distressed. After all, it wasn't easy to send a disciple into the Nine-Blade sect. After so many years, he had only sent 2 disciples in, and now one of them had died. Let's wait for the Nine-Blade sect to catch up and see what happens, the man at the front said. After all, this is Tianjing Basin, not the Yun Nation. These 2 guys were so ostentatious and injured someone. Yet, they still want to leave. They're looking down on us. Lin Yuan remained silent. Looking up to him and looking down on him? That was a lie. The man in front was probably thinking about the Nine-Blade sect. After all, with such skills at such a young age, he definitely wasn't an ordinary person. He probably had a family or sect behind him. If they died here, the Nine-Blade sect would probably be the first place the other party would look for. The Nine-Blade sect had become more and more overbearing in recent years. It would be reassuring if 2 of those old fellows from the Nine-Blade sect died. Just for this reason alone, it was worth interfering. Chapter 435. It was already afternoon when they left the city. They didn't walk too far before the sky turned dark. It wasn't easy for him to find a forest. He parked the ox car by the roadside and came back with some firewood. The roars of wild beasts could be heard in the forest. From time to time, they could also hear some rustling in the underbrush, but they couldn't see anything. There are only steamed buns left. Rin Baqian took out some steamed buns from the carriage. These were taken from the hotel. After all, they were in a hurry to leave, and it was good enough to have steamed buns to eat. Rin Baqian sprinkled some salt and chili on the steamed buns until they were slightly charred. The taste was pretty good. A spicy sauce would be even better. After eating the steamed buns, the 2 of them lay on the grass and looked up at the sky, the mosquitoes buzzing in their ears. Slap! Rin Baqian gave himself a slap and perished together with a large mosquito. Why is it only me? Rin Baqian felt that something was amiss. Lin Xiaola wasn't affected at all, but those mosquitoes were moving toward him. Hoo-hoo! Rin Baqian turned his head to look and saw a mosquito land on her face. Its proboscis pierced into her face, but it was as if it had pierced into a steel plate. The moment it came into contact with her face, the proboscis broke, and the remaining mosquito flew into the air with an aggrieved look on its face. His skin was so thick that it made others envious and jealous. Ren Bachien sighed and continued to lie there and look at the sky. The night sky of this world was filled with stars and was extremely beautiful. On Earth, he could see the beautiful night sky when he was young, but he couldn't see it anymore after he grew up. The dark sky hangs low accompanied by a sea of bright stars. The insects fly, the insects are flying. Ren Bachien smacked his lips and couldn't continue singing. He was already a mosquito. Mosquitoes fly, mosquitoes fly. The sound of horses galloping in the distance broke the silence of the night. Ren Bachien felt that he might have something to do if he traveled at night on a fast horse. In the afternoon, he knew that someone would definitely chase after him, but it was a little slower than he expected. "Wake up, there's work to do." "I'll do it when I wake up," Lin Shaola said in a daze. "I can wait, but they probably can't." While the two of them were talking, the sound of horse hooves got closer. There were at least 6 or 7 horses. "There's fire. There's someone in front. Based on the route, it's most likely them. Be careful." The few people on horseback saw the fire in the distance and immediately became spirited. They hurried and finally caught up. The other party had actually killed a few disciples of the Nine Blades sect in Longzhou City. No matter what, they could not let him off. The sound of the horses' hooves stopped outside the range of the firelight. In the dark, they saw 2 people lying not far from the bonfire and immediately knew that they had found their targets. "Sirs, I don't know how my Nine Blades sect disciples offended the 2 of you for you to use such a vicious method. Out of 5 of them, only 1 survived. Furthermore, he was seriously injured. In the future, even if he were to be cured, he would be crippled. Aren't the methods of the 2 of you too vicious? Do you think you can just leave after killing someone?" 6 people walked out of the dark night. The first 2 were in their 50s or 60s, while the other 4 were in their 30s or 40s. They all had a capable aura about them. "They are too ugly," Ren Bachien said without hesitation. Although the other party had provoked him first, the Nine Blade sect was just a small sect in Ren Bachien's eyes. On the other hand, he was a member of the palace and was a secondary class, rank 4 official. If he wasn't out on a mission this time, he could simply transfer a team of guards to destroy the entire Nine Blade sect. With such a huge gap, he naturally couldn't be bothered to explain to the people of the Nine Blade sect. Furthermore, there was no need to explain. Was he supposed to say that the other party had deliberately offended him and reason with them? Ren Bachien couldn't be bothered to do such a thing. The people of the Nine Blade sect had come with anger. The reason why they didn't make a move was because they saw the corpse of the horse and knew that the girl was an expert. Upon hearing Ren Bachien's words, they were even more furious. If they let the 2 of them go, the Nine Blade sect would no longer be able to show its face in the future. "Since you said so, there's no need to say anything more. Capture them and wait for the sect master to deal with them." One of them laughed angrily and didn't say anything else. He leaped into the air and pounced toward the 2 people. The others also surrounded them. Ren Bachien lay on the ground, held his pistol, and fired 3 consecutive shots at the figure in the air. After 3 consecutive gunshots, the person changed his position in the air and shouted, "Trying to hurt me with mere concealed weapons? You're looking down on the Nine Blade sect." Along with this voice, a lotus flower formed by snow-white blade gleams bloomed in the air. When the person in the air saw that the 2 of them did not move, he relaxed. He thought to himself that the 2 of them were still young and had not seen much of the world. That young girl could kill a horse and was quite strong. However, when faced with a life-and-death battle, she was stunned. After capturing the 2 of them, he wanted to let them know that this was Tianjing Basin, not the Yun Nation. Not everyone could be arrogant and despotic here. The lives of those disciples would be repaid by the 2 of them with their lives. That girl would first pose in 18 positions to satisfy her craving before killing them to pay with her life. The eyes of the people surrounding them lit up when they saw the snow-white lotus flower in the air. This move was called Seventh Blade. The Nine Blades sect's name wasn't because of the 9 blades, but because of the 9 moves. Each move was extremely powerful, and the later the moves, the more powerful they were. No one had mastered 9th blade for many years, and only the sect leader had mastered 8th blade. This move was the strongest move after 7th blade. This elder used the strongest move from the start, and it was obvious that he was determined to win. Just as all kinds of thoughts were running through everyone's minds, a figure suddenly bounced up from the ground and rushed in front of him at a faster speed. The body twisted a few times in the air and passed through the saber light. Before he could react, a claw slashed at his face, and then another. That person's face was covered with 10 bloody marks, and his entire face was beyond recognition. He screamed and fell from the air. This unforeseen event shocked the people surrounding them. One had to know that the person who fell was an intermediate Earth Wheel expert, yet he was actually defeated in 1 round. Spirit Wheel, a hoarse voice with a slight tremble, could be heard. Everyone was shocked. Spirit Wheel expert? One had to know that a Spirit Wheel expert was definitely an expert among experts, no matter where he was. If he were to become an official in Great Xia, he would at least be a rank 4 official. Most of the practitioners had probably never seen a Spirit Wheel expert in their entire lives. Now, this little girl was actually a Spirit Wheel expert. They were actually going to make a move against a Spirit Wheel expert. Thinking about what they were about to do, everyone suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. There was nothing worse than being an enemy of a Spirit Wheel expert. If there was, it would be what they were preparing to do. They were preparing to make a move against a Spirit Wheel expert. It was simply putting their necks on the edge of a knife. No one doubted the words of that voice because it belonged to another elder who was also an Earth Wheel expert. This time, the 9-Blade sect had sent 2 Earth Wheel experts to capture the 2 of them. One had to know that the 9-Blade sect only had a total of 5 Earth Wheel experts and was already the largest sect in Longzhou City. Earth Wheel experts could already do whatever they wanted in most places. However, they didn't expect to encounter an even more tyrannical person this time. She was actually a Spirit Wheel expert. Lin Shaola landed on the ground, licked her paws, and frowned. It seemed that the taste of blood wasn't that good. Be careful of diarrhea. Rin Baqian saw her actions and couldn't help but say, "Don't you find it dirty to lick the blood of any Tom, Dick, or Harry?" Lin Shaola immediately rubbed her paws on her body. If they were previously judged as a Tom, Dick, or Harry, the people from the 9-Blade sect would definitely fight to the death with the other party. However, after knowing that the other party was a Spirit Wheel expert, all these thoughts disappeared. Now, they were thinking about how to leave this place alive. Chapter 436. How should we deal with them? Lin Shaola wiped the blood off her claws, ignored them, and turned to look at Rin Baqian. Rin Baqian looked at the people around him. It was as if they were frozen in place and didn't dare to move. The man on the ground also stopped screaming for fear that his voice would attract Lin Shaola's attention. With just 1 move, Lin Shaola had only used 1 move, and the few people who had come with a menacing aura were trembling like quails, not daring to move at all. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts when they heard Lin Shaola's words. They were afraid that the man would say, "Kill them." In the face of a Spirit Wheel expert, they didn't even have the chance to escape. There was no need to make a move. Just the title of a Spirit Wheel expert was enough to frighten them. "Sir, if there's anything I can do for you, I'll be at your beck and call. I'll definitely do it properly," a man suddenly said. "Leave this one. As for the others," Rin Baqian pointed at the man and muttered to himself. The first person who spoke was pretty good and had quick reflexes. Rin Baqian was indeed lacking someone to follow him around. It didn't matter to him whether the others were killed or not. As long as most of the commoners were left behind, he didn't care about the lives of these practitioners. After he finished speaking, the first person immediately heaved a sigh of relief. "The night is long, and I'm not in the mood to sleep. Let's play rock, paper, scissors. Those who win can leave, and those who lose. The scenery here isn't bad, and it's a good place to be buried. There are mountains on one side and water on the other, so you won't be lonely in the future," Rin Baqian said after a slight pause. Upon hearing this, everyone felt a chill in their hearts. Not only did they encounter a spirit wheel expert, but there was also a person who didn't follow common sense and acted based on his preferences. No matter who it was, they were afraid of meeting such a person who didn't follow common sense, especially when there was a spirit wheel expert by his side. "Sir, we were blind. Please let us live. As long as you have any instructions in the future, we won't say a word," another earth wheel expert said while suppressing his fear. At the same time, he cursed his dead disciples. If it weren't for them, he wouldn't have encountered such a situation. "Please let us go. We were blind." The others also begged for mercy. "I didn't want to cause trouble, but you guys chased after me. Don't blame me. I've already given you a chance." Rinpoche was halfway through his sentence when a gust of wind blew past him. Lin Shaola was gone. Rinpoche looked at the empty spot next to Lin Shaola, who was originally standing beside him. Then, he looked at the few man-wheel experts and 2 earth wheel experts around him and felt that he had been F***ed. That simple-minded person actually abandoned her and disappeared. Moreover, he had thrown himself into the crowd and disappeared, surrounded by enemies. Rinpoche's expression did not change in the slightest. It was precisely at this moment that he couldn't panic, reveal his cowardice, and let the other party see through him. Sneaking a glance at the few people opposite him, he saw the eyes of the person who had just spoken start to emit an ominous glint. That person was also one of the 2 earth wheel experts. The others were also getting restless, but they didn't want to capture him. Instead, they wanted to escape. Just now, Rinpoche was still thinking about how to deal with them. In the blink of an eye, the situation had changed, and that spirit wheel expert had actually disappeared. How could others not be tempted by such an opportunity? The only thing that made everyone hesitate was what was going on right now. Where did that spirit wheel expert go? If he ran away and was caught, his fate would be even worse. Or should they capture the person in front of them? Just as everyone was hesitating, Rinpoche faintly said, "A person can be weak and have low martial arts skills, but he must have a good brain. Your martial arts skills are low, and your brains aren't good either. It hasn't been easy for you to survive until now. However, if you want to continue living, you won't live for long even if I don't kill you." Rinpoche's brain worked rapidly as he spoke. At this moment, whether or not he could delay the few people opposite him depended on his eloquence. If the other party saw that he was guilty, they would probably make a move immediately. By the time Lin Shaola returned, he would have already fallen into their hands. At that time, his life and death would no longer be in his hands. However, he couldn't force them too harshly. Otherwise, they would immediately take the risk out of desperation, and he would be unlucky. The only thing he could rely on now was that the other party didn't know his actual strength. He had to use his words to stall for time. "Sir, what do you mean by this?" Everyone's attention was immediately attracted by Rinpoche's words. The 2 earth wheel experts, who were originally ready to make a move, were shocked when they heard this. "Dayo is currently at war, yet you guys are still restless. As far as I know, Dayo can no longer tolerate you guys and is preparing to bathe Tianjing Basin in blood. All of you, including your families, must die. However, you guys still don't know it." Rinpoche sneered. Rinpoche's words shocked everyone again. Even the 2 earth wheel experts couldn't care less about anything else. Even though the remnant citizens of the Hao Nation and the Aboriginals were in the same nation, they were like fire and water. It wouldn't be a day or two before the remnant citizens of the Hao Nation wanted to leave this basin. Everyone knew after birth that the vast land outside belonged to them in the past, but now they could only hide in this basin. Under such circumstances, the remnant citizens of the Hao Nation naturally had many tricks up their sleeves. Shiwanya, the protectorate of the South's protectorate of the South, would seize the slightest hint of this situation and kill everyone. This made even more people resentful, and some people were worried that the Aboriginals would come in one day and kill everyone. Under such worries, they wanted to leave this basin even more and control their lives in their own hands. At this moment, when they heard Rinpoche say what they were most worried about, everyone couldn't care less about anything else. "How did Sir know?" An earth wheel expert hurriedly asked. Right now, he couldn't care less about the other party and escape. One had to know that Rinpoche's words involved all the people in Tianjin Basin, even if they had families. "That's why I'm here," Rinpoche said faintly. Everyone wanted to ask more questions, but a figure suddenly appeared among them. Lin Shaola was standing there, carrying two people in her hands. Seeing that Lin Shaola had returned, Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief. Even though it had only been 2 minutes, it was enough for him to die several times over. However, now wasn't the time to talk about this. "Who is this?" They were peeping in the forest just now. Lin Shaola threw the two people to the ground. Their faces were scratched one after another. Lin Shaola raised her head and looked at Rinpoche with hopeful eyes, as if she was asking for credit and a reward. Rinpoche was exasperated that she didn't live up to his expectations. She threw him aside and ran to catch people. "You have to remember your identity. You're a bodyguard, a bodyguard, a bodyguard." If there weren't outsiders around, you would have taught her what a bodyguard was. "Dead Toad? Lin Yuan?" Those people from the Nine Blades sect exclaimed when they saw the two of them. "You can even recognize this?" Rinpoche looked down and saw that the two people were beyond recognition. Why did Lin Shaola love scratching people's faces so much? Chapter 437. Death Toad? Is it that gang from Longzhou City? Rinpoche had heard of the Death Toad when he was in Longzhou City, so he immediately thought of it when he heard the name. He didn't know why these two people followed him here. Yes, these two are the chief and deputy chief of the Death Toad. "Sir, what you said just now was a lie, right?" a trembling voice asked. Normally, the people from the Nine Blade sect would definitely want to know why these two people were following them. However, they were more concerned about what Rinpoche said just now. One had to know that what Rinpoche said just now was simply too important to them. If Dayo really wanted to use their troops in Tianjin Basin, they were afraid that blood would flow in this cage eventually. Other than a few experts who could escape by climbing over the surrounding mountains and cliffs, the rest had nowhere to run. Now, they only hoped that Rinpoche was lying to them, and completely threw aside the fact that Rinpoche wanted to take their lives just now. "Lie to you? Is there a need for me to do that?" Rinpoche sneered. Tianjin Basin was now like psoriasis to Dayo. If one day, the Empress no longer cared about the original agreement and wanted to slaughter these remnant citizens of the Han Nation, he reckoned that the entire imperial court would raise their hands in approval. Dayo had never learned how to appease people, and it had never been a country that paid attention to etiquette and benevolence. To them, killing was the most convenient thing. Hearing what Rinpoche said, the people from the Nine Blade sect were speechless and had an ugly look on their faces. "Sir, you are here for..." Just now, Rinpoche had said that he was here for this matter. Furthermore, with a spirit wheel expert by his side, increased the persuasiveness of his words. "I am here for this matter. Consider it as giving you a chance to live," Rinpoche said faintly. If he didn't make this trip, the lives of these remnant citizens of the Han Nation would depend on the Empress's mood. However, in his eyes, these remnant citizens of the Han Nation were still somewhat useful. After all, the Aboriginals were too boorish, and their brains were filled with muscles. A country couldn't only know how to fight wars. If he wanted to use some other people, these remnant citizens of the Han Nation would be a better choice. After all, even if the Yun Nation was conquered in the future, the resistance of the people of the Yun Nation that had just been conquered would probably be even more intense. In contrast, these remnant citizens of the Han Nation had been under the rule of Dayo for so many years, and the rule of the Aboriginals was deeply ingrained in their bones. This could be seen from the fact that they only dared to make small moves in private and didn't dare to rise up in revolt. Therefore, these remnant citizens of the Han Nation were more useful. Originally, the life and death of these people didn't matter to him, but after seeing their reactions after listening to his words, he changed his mind. It would be better to reveal his identity and make those who were obedient stay behind. With them at his beck and call, he would be able to avoid a lot of trouble during his trip to Tianjin Basin. At the very least, there wouldn't be another incident like what happened in Longzhou City. If they did well, it would be fine to keep them. In any case, he would definitely need people. So it turns out that my lord has come for this matter. We were rash before. I hope my lord does not take offense. Rinpoche nodded slightly. These words were pleasing to the ears. On account of your tactful behavior, Rinpoche said halfway through his sentence, but everyone understood what he was implying. I was indeed rash. It turns out that we are a family. Rinpoche, who's a family with you? Don't you have any shame? The Empress and I are a family. My lord, even if we want to resist, we don't have enough weapons. Currently, Tianjin Basin is filled with bone knives. Back then, when we came here, the knives and spears were melted down and reforged into kitchen knives. Now, most people here use bone knives. Although they can be sharpened, the Aboriginals are strong and heavy. Furthermore, they are wielding steel knives. After a few collisions, the bone knives will break. Therefore, we have always been powerless to resist. Is my lord here with the intention of helping us? Rinpoche, did this group of people misunderstand something? Are you asking me for weapons to rebel? May I know which family in the nation you are from? Or are you sent by the imperial court? Rinpoche, someone from Great Xia came a month ago and is currently in the valley. At that time, he said that the Yun nation would definitely help us. Now that my lord is here, there is such a misunderstanding. If we have my lord's help, our chances of success will be much higher. There are only 3 spirit wheel experts in the Protectorate of the South. With the spirit wheel expert from Great Xia and my lord's companion, it is enough to restrain or even defeat them. The only thing missing now is the weapon. Rinpoche finally came to his senses. Did this group of people think that he was sent by the Yun nation to help them resist? Thinking back, he did say that he was from the Yun nation. After all, he and Lin Xiaola didn't look like Aboriginals. The Aboriginals had never used outsiders before him, so they didn't suspect this. In addition, Lin Xiaola was a spirit wheel expert, and he said that he was here to help them. It was no wonder that there was such a misunderstanding. However, this misunderstanding was a good opportunity. According to him, someone from Great Xia was here too? Or was it a spirit wheel expert? Great Xia wasn't going to stop and wasn't ready to give up. From what they said, it seemed like they were going to make a big move. Needless to say, as long as he followed their words, he might even be able to infiltrate the enemy. At the very least, he knew that they were preparing something big. When the time came, he could inform Shiwanya and get rid of them. After getting rid of these people who were up to no good, it would be much easier to deal with the remnant citizens of the Hao Nation. After thinking for a while, Rinpoche immediately came up with an idea. You don't have the right to know my identity. You just need to know that I'm here to help you. Rinpoche said faintly and put on airs. In fact, after seeing his posture, this group of people was even more convinced. This was because the people from Great Xia had the same attitude. Regardless of whether it was the people from Great Xia or the Yun nation, they looked at them as if they were looking at stray dogs. It was normal for them to be arrogant. Where is that person from Great Xia now? Rinpoche asked. He went to the Golden Ring residence previously. His current location isn't something we know. Although the Nine Blades sect was considered pretty good in the vicinity of Longzhou City, it was only a small sect in the entire Tianjin Basin. Naturally, they wouldn't know too much. Consider yourselves lucky. If not for the fact that I still need your help this time, none of you will be able to go back after attacking me. Everyone was drenched in cold sweat. They were really lucky to be able to escape with their lives after attacking a spirit will expert. When they returned, they would definitely offer incense to the patriarch. Rinpoche muttered to himself, "Leave 2 people behind to guide me. The rest of you can go back." "Sir, I'll stay behind." The one who spoke was the rather quick-witted man from before. Previously, before everyone could react, he was the first to surrender. At this moment, he was the first to do so. He also had his own thoughts. Previously, he did it to survive, but now, he wanted to hug Rinpoche's thigh. As long as he hugged Rinpoche's thigh, even if the rebellion against the Aboriginals failed in the future, he might still be brought away. Furthermore, when the war started, he wouldn't be sent as cannon fodder to the front lines. "Sir, I'll also stay behind to guide you. If there's any trouble, I'll be able to solve it for you." The other person who spoke was the Earth Wheel expert who hadn't made a move since the beginning. His thoughts were similar. Although an Earth Wheel expert had a higher status, it also depended on which sect he was from. The two of you stay behind. The rest of you can get lost. Bring the two people on the ground with you as well. Ren Baqian waved his hand. He couldn't be bothered with why those two people followed him. There were already more important things to do. Everyone looked at each other, cupped their fists toward Ren Baqian, and left with their heads lowered. Only an old Earth Wheel expert and a Man Wheel expert from the Nine-Blade sect were left standing there obediently. Ren Baqian stretched his back and said to the two people in front of him, "I don't know much about the situation here. This time, I'm only here because I received orders. Tell me what you know." He didn't expect to encounter such a situation as soon as he entered Tianjing Basin. He was really lucky. Chapter 438. A few disciples from the Nine Blades sect tied the Death Toad and Lin Yuan to their horses and left under the cover of the night. Along the way, everyone looked at these two people from time to time. If they were killed, the Death Toad would be finished. If they were to make a move now, no one would know. That person from a Yun nation would probably not care about such a small matter. I'm afraid there will be a war in the future. At least the two of them are a fighting force. In the end, the Earthwheel elder whose face was scratched by Lin Xiao sighed, and everyone gave up on this idea. In the wilderness on both sides of the road, a man and a woman hid in the dark and watched this group of people pass by with suspicious expressions. How did that coward Lin Yuan end up in the hands of the Nine-Blade sect? A woman asked in a languid voice. Are they chasing after the two people you mentioned? The man asked. Most likely, but the situation is a little strange. Are we still going? I'm afraid there's a problem. Go back and find out where the two people from the Nine-Blade sect went. After daybreak, Ren Baqian and the others headed toward the Golden Ring residence. It would normally take 4 days to travel from Longzhou City to Jiaisai City, but it took them 5 days. Along the way, Ren Baqian obtained a lot of useful information from the two people from the Nine-Blade sect. They knew a lot more than what Ren Baqian had inquired about previously. After all, there were many things that these sects knew, but ordinary people didn't. The division of power in Tianjing Basin was much more complicated than what he knew from Shuanya. There were more than a dozen powers and hundreds of sects, big and small. Their relationships were intricate and chaotic. However, there was also an alliance behind them that had been contacting all sides to prepare for an uprising. This alliance was led by 3 major powers and 8 major sections. Among them, the 3 major factions were the 3 biggest factions in Tianjing Basin, and they controlled almost all the cities in Tianjing Basin. They were the North Alliance, the Southern Metropolis, and the Green Bellflower. Among them, the North Alliance was the most powerful, followed by the Southern Metropolis, and the Green Bellflower was the smallest. However, the internal structure of these 3 powers was also complicated. One of the 8 major sects was the Golden Ring residence. Its sphere of influence covered 6 cities, not the 3 that Rinpochian had heard before. The Golden Ring residence was the smallest of the 8 major sections. The largest one was called the Spiritual Mountain Sect. It was the largest sect in the Northern Alliance. Its sphere of influence encompassed close to 20 cities. Many of the generals in the Northern Alliance came from the Spiritual Mountain Sect. In addition, among these 8 big sects, there was one that Rinpochian found rather interesting. It was called the Manxing Pavilion, and it was located within the territory of the Green Bellflower. It was said that all the members of the pavilion were women, and one of the pavilion masters was called Qingling. From this name, one could guess the relationship between the 2 parties. Along the way, Rinpochian felt more than once that these 2 people from the Nine-Blade sect were really stupid. They didn't even have the slightest bit of suspicion towards him. They didn't even know his exact identity before telling him everything they knew. However, thinking about it, it was probably because the ancient race had never had any outsiders before. The ancient race and the other races were mutually exclusive. The 2 of them had never doubted that they would stand on the side of the ancient race. In addition, they were too desperate for outside support. They wanted to get out of this cage and take back their original land. At the thought of this, he felt that they were rather pitiful. Although he was pitiful, he could not pity him. There was no right or wrong between the two sides. It was just that their positions were different and they were enemies. After walking like this for 5 days, everyone finally arrived at GCI City, where the Golden Ring residence was located. After arriving, everyone first found an inn. The Earth Wheel experts from the Nine Blades sect went to the Golden Ring residence to deliver the visiting card, while Rinpochian took Lin Shaola for a stroll in GCI City. GCI City was much bigger and more prosperous than Longzhou City. The streets were considered well-organized. The lives of the ordinary people here were slightly better than in Longzhou City. At the very least, they looked better. Their clothes were still very old, but they were considered clean and didn't have many patches. However, they were only slightly better off. The ordinary people were still considered sallow and emaciated. In general, after visiting these two cities, Rinpochian roughly understood the living conditions of the remnant citizens of the Han Nation. Poverty had always surrounded them, and having a full stomach was probably their biggest wish. In addition, what attracted Rinpochian was the various shops on both sides of the street. Whether it was daily necessities like salt or cloth, the prices here were 50% higher than in Lon City. In addition to those common shops, there were also many unique shops. For example, a bone grinder shop specialized in sharpening bone knives, arrowheads, and other weapons. Rinpochian specially went in for a walk and finally bought a bone knife. This kind of bone knife had a very sharp edge and was almost as sharp as an iron knife. Its biggest flaw was its hardness and toughness, which couldn't be compared to iron products. If it were to be chopped by an iron knife, cracks would appear after a few hits. Some bones had good toughness and hardness and could be made into knives that could be used for a long time. However, these were very expensive and weren't affordable for ordinary people. Is that the disciple of the Golden Ring residence? Rinpochian raised his chin at the back of a figure in the crowd in the distance. From where he stood, he could see the other party. He was carrying a long bone knife with a row of 9 golden rings on the back of it. When walking, the golden rings would make a crisp sound when they hit the back of the bone knife. Previously, Rinpochian had heard from them that these golden rings were made using a special method. When wielding the bone knife, these golden rings would make an ear-piercing sound that would interfere with the other party's 5 senses and easily make the other party impatient. If one were to fight with a disciple of the Golden Ring residence under the sun, not only would one have to be careful of being disturbed by these golden rings, but they would also have to be careful of the reflection of the light. The Golden Ring residence had a unique technique. When wielding the knife, these golden rings would reflect the sunlight and form countless light fragments that would interfere with the other party's vision. With their ears and eyes disrupted by light, it would be difficult for even a level 1 Golden Ring residence disciple to deal with them. Yes, sir, the Nine Blades sect disciple replied. The Nine Blades sect disciple replied. This person's name was Lu Xing, and the Earthwheel elder was called Lu Chongmei. While Rinpochian was strolling around the city, the Empress was sitting in the garden in a daze. Without that person by her side, these days were getting more and more boring. She wasn't even interested in watching television. Sure enough, it was more interesting when he was around. In the past, she had always been alone and didn't feel anything. However, after having someone by her side, it was especially easy to feel lonely. "Has there been any news from him?" the Empress asked without raising her head. "Your Majesty, Sir Rin didn't bring the radio with him this time," Qing Yuan whispered behind her. After that, she turned her head and stuck out her tongue at Hong Wan. Her eyes were full of smiles as she thought. Sir Rin has only been gone for a few days, and Her Majesty already misses him. The Empress sat for a long time before getting up and walking to the candy tree. The candy on the tree was already 1/3 gone. At that time, Rinpochian had solemnly vowed that he would return after finishing the candy. The Empress picked up a pair of scissors and cut off another piece of candy. When she looked again, there was only half of it left. "If he doesn't return after finishing the candy, I will tie him up and hang him on the tree." The Empress raised her eyebrows and thought to herself. She heard that there were 23 ways to tie someone up. She could try all of them. Chapter 439. When Renbachian returned to the inn, he saw a few short-legged horses at the entrance and a few disciples of the Golden Ring sect with bone knives on their backs standing there. The surrounding pedestrians carefully avoided them and didn't dare to approach. The bustling street highlighted these people. The Golden Ring residence was extremely powerful locally. Even the warlord of Thorn City had to be courteous to them, let alone ordinary people who naturally stayed far away. Upon seeing Renbachian and Lin Xiaola, they sized them up, and one of the disciples cupped his hands and asked, "Are you Sir from the Yun Nation?" "Yes." Renbachian nodded. "Our elder is waiting for you in the inn," the disciple said respectfully. Renbachian nodded and strode into the inn. Someone inside had already heard the commotion outside. He walked out with large strides and said in a clear voice, "Young master, you must be from the Yun Nation. It must have been a long journey." Renbachian looked up. It was a man of about 40 years old. He was thin, had sharp eyebrows, a gentle attitude, and exuded a steady charm. On Earth, even if he was 40 years old, there would be plenty of women who would fight for him. He was only slightly less handsome than Renbachian. "I'm Ling Ziquan, an elder of the Golden Ring residence in charge of external affairs." "Greetings, sir. There's no need for formalities. You should be clear about my purpose for coming here," Renbachian said faintly. "I've heard a little about it. This isn't a place to entertain guests, and we have neglected you by staying here. Arrangements have been made, so please move over and let the Golden Ring residence play the host," Ling Ziquan said with a smile. "All right." Renbachian nodded slightly. He knew that entering the Golden Ring residence was just the beginning. Although this person's attitude was respectful, it wasn't as respectful as the people from the Nine Blades sect. After all, this was the difference between a large and a small sect, and he reckoned that it wouldn't be as easy to fool as the people from the Nine Blades sect. He had to pass the test of the Golden Ring residence before he could come into contact with more things. If he was exposed, he was afraid that Lin Xiaola would have to escape with him. One had to know that there was a spirit wheel expert in the Golden Ring residence. There were a total of 13 famous spirit wheel experts in the entire Tianjing Basin. Each of the 8 major sects had one, and the largest sect, Lingshan, had 2. However, even though there were 13 spirit wheel experts, these remnant citizens of the Hao Nation still didn't dare to act rashly. At the same level, the aboriginal experts who had reached the Cardinal Heaven level were too terrifying, and the spirit wheel experts in Tianjing Basin could only rank in the bottom half of the spirit wheel experts. Previously, when Great Xia attacked U.S. City, 7 spirit wheel experts besieged Xiongyu, the Deputy Protector General of the Protectorate of the North. Xiongyu died, and 2 of Great Xia's spirit wheel experts died in battle. The Protector General of the South, Shi Wanya, was stronger than Xiongyu. Together with the other 2 Cardinal Heaven experts, the 13 spirit wheel experts didn't dare to act rashly. As a result, these remnant citizens of the Hao Nation needed weapons and spirit wheel experts for external support. Renbachian was now a citizen of the Yun Nation and had a spirit wheel expert as his bodyguard. As such, he was naturally treated with the highest level of respect. Everyone left the city and headed towards the most eye-catching mountain peak in the northwest direction. When they got closer, they saw that there were layers of pavilions and pavilions from the foot of the mountain to the waist of the mountain. The buildings were vaguely visible among the trees. Although the Golden Ring residence was a sect, its location was the size of a small town. When they got closer, they could see a mountain gate in front of them. On both sides, there were stone walls that were 3 meters tall that enclosed the entire Golden Ring residence. Only the eaves were exposed. In front of the mountain gate, 4 disciples stood on both sides. They were all wearing yellow shirts and brown pleated skirts with bone knives on their backs. A group of people hurriedly walked out of the mountain gate and welcomed Renbachian and the others. First, they exchanged conventional greetings. The person who came was the chief of the Golden Ring residence, Zhang Changkong. He looked to be around 60 years old and had a dignified appearance. Behind him was his wife, who looked to be in her early 30s. She had a graceful figure and was extremely beautiful. However, Rinpoche had heard from the people of the Nine Blades sect about some famous characters in the Golden Ring residence. He knew that this person was already over 40 years old and was a famous beauty when she was young. She was known as the Painting Fairy, and it was said that her painting skills were superb. In addition to the two of them, there were also the two inner deacons, the law enforcement deacon and the outer deacon beside him. Out of the 6 deacons in the residence, for appeared. After all, Rinpoche was an envoy from the Yun Nation, and they had no choice but to treat him seriously. Even without mentioning Rinpoche's identity, Lin Shaola's strength as a spirit wheel expert was enough for them to treat her this way. "Young master, you have another companion. Is she in the carriage?" After the conventional greetings, Zhan Chongkong asked. He was still very curious about this spirit wheel expert. He heard that this person was only a young lady, but she was already at the spirit wheel level. He was afraid that there would be another person like Qi Zixiao and Li Yuanzhu in the future. Rinpoche turned his head and opened the curtains. Indeed, Lin Shaola was sleeping soundly inside. She had really let go of herself during these 2 trips with him. She was even more so than when she was in Qingxin Palace Hall. Rinpoche didn't say anything. He took out a piece of milk candy and threw it into his mouth. After chewing it twice, he blew on Lin Shaola. Then, Lin Shaola lay there with her eyes closed, sniffled, and swam toward him. Looking at her salted posture, Rinpoche really wanted to take off his shoes and stretch out his feet without saying anything. If you remember correctly, Lin Shaola's sense of smell was much more sensitive than that of ordinary people. However, it was a little inhumane to do so, so he eventually gave up on this tempting idea. It was mainly because Rinpoche was afraid that she would scratch him out of anger. "Count to 3. Otherwise, I will throw this candy away." Rinpoche took out a piece of candy and slowly unwrapped it. 3. Rinpoche turned around and threw the candy into the distance. A gust of wind blew past Rinpoche. Lin Shaola appeared in the air, grabbed the white rabbit creamy candy, threw it in her mouth, and questioned him. "What about 1 and 2? Do you even know how to count?" "Huh." Rinpoche felt that it was really embarrassing to be questioned by someone from Dayo like this. Everyone looked at Rinpoche teasing the spirit wheel expert like he was teasing a pet. They couldn't believe that this was the spirit wheel expert. However, when she came out of the carriage to catch the candy, she displayed her agility and speed. Everyone had to admit that she was indeed a spirit wheel expert. In everyone's impression, spirit wheel experts were either dignified, arrogant, or otherworldly. At least, this was what they knew. For example, it was rare to see the great elder in the sect even once a month. Most of the time, he would only practice hard in the mountains or climb over the cliffs around the basin to search for medicinal herbs. Every time they met, he would only say a few words. In their minds, this was how a spirit wheel expert should be. Lin Shaola was too different from the spirit wheel experts that they knew. However, after carefully sizing her up, she looked to be about 16 or 17 years old. Her body hadn't matured yet. Her hair was tied up in a simple bun, and her face was delicate and pretty. In a few years, she might even become a beauty. She was wearing a silk tube top and a short skirt, which was somewhat similar to how the Aboriginals dressed. However, perhaps this was the current trend in the Yun Nation. After taking a closer look at Lin Shaola's appearance, everyone suffered another blow. Thinking about how they were already so old and hadn't even crossed the path to heaven, they felt that they had wasted their years. They had to admit that there were indeed geniuses in this world. "I'm Zhan Chongkong. Please." Zhan Chongkong sorted out his emotions and introduced himself. Seeing that Lin Shaola didn't seem to care, he gestured to Rinpoche. Rinpoche and Zhan Chongkong walked side by side, while Lin Shaola stared at the bag of candy hanging from Rinpoche's neck. Her gaze swayed along with the candy bag. Painting Fairy wanted to chat with her, but she didn't know her temperament. Seeing that her attention was focused on the person in front of her, she gave up on the idea. However, she thought to herself that she didn't know what was so special about this man from the Yun Nation that such a genius would favor him so much that she couldn't bear to let go of him. If Rinpoche knew what she was thinking, he would laugh like crazy. Chapter 440. Where are you two from? How should I address you? Wang Jing. My surname is Yi. Call me Yi Yinxian. Rinbaqian made up a random name. He didn't know much about the Yun Nation and only knew of two places. One was the capital of the Yun Nation, Wangjing, and the other was Qingfeng City. As for the culprit, she only knew of one person, Yi Ku, the warlord of Qingfeng City. That fellow had the audacity to rob her of a batch of silver, and the Empress had already arranged for his entire family to be exterminated. After all, he was only pretending to be a Yun Nation merchant at the beginning. He didn't do much research on the various aspects of the Yun Nation. He didn't expect that a freak combination of factors would lead to the current situation. Wild cloud immortal, overflowing with immortal chi. What a good name, painting fairy praised. Previously, the two of you from the Nine Blades sect did not speak in detail. I wonder if Mr. Yi could tell us the detailed purpose of your visit? External Warden Ling Ziquan asked. His question was also what everyone wanted to ask. This was what everyone wanted to know the most at the moment. At this moment, everyone was in the middle of the banquet. 17 glowing pearls hung in the air. The light was very good and soft, not dazzling at all. It was also not as oppressive as the lamps. The entire hall was brightly lit. Rinbaqian looked at it enviously. This wasn't an ordinary night luminescent pearl. Night luminescent pearls weren't this bright. This thing was almost as bright as a 40-watt light bulb. It could definitely be considered treasure. At the highest table were Zhan Changkong and Painting Fairy. Slightly below them were Rin Baqian and Lin Xiaola. Further below them were the two people from a Nine Blades sect. Opposite him were the 6 great deacons of the Golden Ring residence. At this time, he finally saw all of them. We have the same enemy. As he spoke, he glanced at Lin Xiaola from the corner of his eye and saw that she was setting up a tower. She piled up the candies that Rinbaqian had just given her, took out a piece from the pile, and scattered it all over the place. Everyone nodded in agreement. The Aboriginals were indeed their common enemy. They occupied your homes and forced you to live and reproduce in such a place. Most of you will never be able to take a step out of here, like a bird in a cage. A mournful look appeared on everyone's face. Rinbaqian's words struck a chord in their hearts. No one was willing to be kept like a caged bird here, even if this place was so big that most ordinary people wouldn't be able to walk around it in their entire lives. That did not hide the fact that they were being held here. The vast and boundless world outside was what they yearned for. This is the best chance you've had in years. Deo has just had a war with Great Xia and is now at war with us. They have almost no time to care about other things. If you launch an attack at this time, they will be attacked from the front and rear and will definitely be in chaos. With us restraining the northeastern forces, the pressure on you will be the least. In the north, there's still Great Xia. Presumably, they would not sit idly by. At that time, there would be wars everywhere, and they would definitely not be able to hold on. This is your best chance to leave this place and take back your original land. Rinbaqian spoke very slowly. Even though he was talking about something that everyone already knew, it struck a chord in everyone's heart because everyone was thinking the same thing. Wasn't this the reason why the people from Great Xia came? This was indeed the best opportunity in 70 years. If he wanted to wait for another opportunity, who knew how long it would take? How many years would it take? We are aware of this matter as well. However, it wasn't just empty talk if you wanted to start a war. I wonder if you can give us some help? Zhan Changkong asked bluntly. Both parties had the same goal, so there was no need to probe each other. What he wanted was to get to the point as soon as possible. 20,000 spear tips and 5,000 swords. Of course, these aren't free gifts, Rinbaqian said faintly. What are your conditions? You need to start a war as soon as possible, preferably within 3 months. In addition, there are some things that I'm afraid you can't decide on, Rinbaqian said. Even though everything was fake, the conditions still had to be stated. The harsher the conditions, the easier it would be for the other party to believe them. If it didn't state any conditions, there might be some loopholes. Many times people were strange. On one hand, they hoped that others would be more generous to them. On the other hand, when the other party was really generous, they would become suspicious. "We aren't ready yet," Zhang Changkong said. "Time flies. By the time you are ready, Dayo will be ready too." According to the information I received, they are already training new soldiers. "How many?" Zhang Changkong quickly asked. 40,000. As soon as he said this, the room suddenly became quiet. 40,000 soldiers wouldn't be able to do much in either Great Xia or the Yun Nation. But if it were 40,000 ancient race soldiers, that wouldn't be a small number. There was silence in the room. Ren Baqin looked down while the others pondered in silence. "This matter is too big and doesn't involve the Golden Ring residents alone. We will discuss it later. Mr. Yi, why don't you meet the higher-ups of our alliance and discuss this in detail?" This matter wasn't something that the Golden Ring residents could decide. Zhang Changkong thought about it and put this matter aside. It was enough for him and the others to know the purpose of this person and some other information. The rest would be left to others. "When can I meet the higher-ups of your alliance?" Rin Baqin asked. "I don't have much time to waste here. Mr. Yi, you must be tired from the long journey. After tonight's banquet, we will send someone to send you there tomorrow. The journey will take 8 to 9 days. Let's toast to Mr. Yi first. No matter what, you are our friend." Zhang Changkong raised his wine cup and toasted him from afar. "Cheers." Rin Baqin drank it in one gulp. His eyes moved slightly. The taste of this wine was unexpectedly good. Even though the alcohol content wasn't high, it was sweet and palatable. There was also a kind of plant fragrance. After drinking this cup of wine, he felt refreshed, and the tiredness from the continuous days of travel had dissipated. "Mr. Yi should have never drunk this wine before. After brewing, this wine has to be stored in the trunk of a hanging tree for a year before being sealed in a mud jar for 3 years. The wine that Mr. Yi drinks is produced from a 1,000-year-old hanging tree. Every year, less than 50 liters are brewed. Even I can't bear to drink it. Indeed, it's not bad." Rin Baqin nodded. He finally found a good point about the remnant citizens of the Han Nation. This wine was brewed rather well. In the future, he could gather a group of people to specialize in brewing wine. "Come." Zhang Changkong clapped his hands again. 16 young girls around 16 years old entered the hall. 8 of them held musical instruments and stood at the side. The other 8 girls held ribbons in their hands and danced in the room. As the girls danced, their graceful figures were faintly discernible under the light muslin. Their ribbons fluttered in the air, attracting Ren Baqin's attention. He had to admit that the remnant citizens of the Han Nation were much better than the Aboriginals in this aspect. The dance of the Aboriginals was full of primitive wildness. Even though it was interesting to watch it occasionally, it wasn't as suitable and aesthetically pleasing as the dance of the young girls in the hall. In particular, one of the young girls exuded the vitality of a young girl from head to toe. Her skin was fair, her appearance was excellent, and every frown and smile was extremely attractive. Compared to the 2 outstanding girls that he had seen in this world, her appearance wasn't inferior at all. The most attractive thing was her eyes. They were clear and full of curiosity, as if she was a young girl who didn't know about the world. Rin Baqin found a second good point about the remnant citizens of the Han Nation. When the time comes, he could gather a group of them and dance in the palace when he had nothing to do. Well, he also had to get those 17 pearls on his head back. Zhang Changkong paid attention to Rin Baqin's expression. Seeing that Rin Baqin was fond of them, he smiled and said, "If Mr. Yi likes them, I can make the decision to gift them to you. I only hope that you will treat them well in the future." Residence Chief. The rest of the people were immediately shocked. The rest of the 8 girls didn't matter, but one of them was the residence chief's youngest daughter. She was usually treated like a treasure by the residence chief. She actually appeared among these people. This was enough to shock everyone. However, Zhang Changkong's words were even more shocking. Everyone looked at Painting Fairy, but realized that she didn't seem to have heard anything. Zhang Changkong looked at Rin Baqin with a smile in his eyes. There was also a tinge of anticipation in his eyes. He thought to himself, no matter what, there will be a battle in the future. If they won, it will be fine. If they lost, I'm afraid that not many people would survive. In particular, Deo wouldn't let people like the Golden Ring residents stay. Even though sending Kaisian away didn't sound good, it was an opportunity for her. Even if she lost, she could still survive. Chapter 441. After hearing Zhang Changkong's words, it would be a lie if Rinpochian said he wasn't moved. He didn't care about the rest, except for the girl. Not only was she beautiful, but her eyes were also as clear and transparent as a lake. There was also the innocence in her eyes, as well as the curiosity of a baby. To men, this was a fatal temptation, and they wanted to protect that innocence. However, thinking about the Empress who was still waiting for him to feed her and his identity, Rinpochian shook his head and said, "Thank you for your kindness, but I appreciate it." "Why? You don't like her?" Zhang Changkong couldn't help but ask. At this moment, his mood was extremely complicated. If Rinpochian accepted directly, he would be worried. But if he rejected it, he would be unhappy. How could he reject his own daughter? Was this person blind? "I'm here to form an alliance and have no interest in anything else." Rinpochian still rejected. After he rejected, he realized that those attendants were relieved, but Zhang Changkong was very unhappy. This made him wonder if Zhang Changkong really liked to give away his daughter. Also, why did those attendants feel relieved? "Just now, you even said something to stop me. Could it be that your lover is inside?" As the dance ended, these women left one after another. Rinpochian felt a little regretful because those eyes were really unforgettable. At night, when Rinpochian went back to rest, Zhang Changkong and Painting Fairy returned to their room. "Are you really in such a hurry? Aren't you afraid of entrusting her to the wrong person?" Painting Fairy asked after entering the room. Previously, she acted as if she didn't hear anything, but now that she was back, she immediately spoke. It was obvious that she wasn't calm. "Although you mentioned this before, I didn't expect you to be so anxious. We just met, and you don't even know his temperament. You actually want to entrust Xian to him. Time waits for no man. Qi Zixiao has already arrived in Gu City. At this time, she isn't in Lan City, but is here. It's hard to predict her intentions." Zhang Changkong sighed. "What?" Painting Fairy was shocked when she heard this. Everyone in the entire Tianjing basin feared and hated that famous woman. "Is this true?" "It can't be wrong," Zhang Changkong said. "Therefore, even if I don't understand this person, I can't care too much. If there are unforeseen circumstances, it will be too late to consider this matter." Moreover, Deo wasn't scary. What was terrifying was the endless number of barbarians in the 60,000 mountains. Even if they managed to get out of the valley, he did not know if they would be able to chase the barbarians back and block their counterattack. He did not know how many people would die and how many would survive. What's more, Kaisian is too pure. If something happens to us, I'm afraid that she will suffer a lot in the future. Since that was the case, he might as well find a backer. "We don't have that much time and opportunity to slowly choose," Zhang Changkong said after a pause. Under normal circumstances, his daughter's looks would naturally be the target of countless pursuers. But in times of chaos, it became her disaster. In addition, she was innocent and ignorant of worldly affairs. Whether or not she could protect herself in this chaotic world was truly worrying. Rather than that, it was better to find a backer. No matter how bad it was, it wouldn't be that bad. After listening to Zhang Changkong's words, a complicated expression appeared on Painting Fairy's face. Although she was reluctant, she didn't speak anymore. "What now?" "Tomorrow, the mansion will send someone to send him to Heavenly Cloud Mountain and have Kaisian go with him. With Kaisian's talent, looks, and temperament, no man will not be tempted after interacting with her for a few days," Zhang Changkong said with a complicated expression. After a long time, Painting Fairy sighed, got up, and left the room. The next morning, Rinpochian woke Lin Xiaola up after washing his face. In order to keep her awake, he played a little game with her. He threw the candy to the left, and Lin Xiaola appeared in the air like a gust of wind. Then, Rinpochian took out another candy and threw it to the right. After catching 5 or 6 candies, Lin Xiaola couldn't help but say faintly, "Why do I feel that something isn't right?" You eat and sleep every day. You will get fat and your body will rust. You need to exercise. Ren Baqian threw a candy behind him, and Lin Xiaola immediately disappeared from his sight. Cough, cough. Ling Ziquan, who had been standing in front of the courtyard for a long time, didn't know how to react. Finally, he coughed. Mr. Yi, please have breakfast. Following Ling Ziquan's words, a few maids brought their breakfast to the courtyard. If there's anything you don't like, just tell me. When do we set off? Ren Baqian asked. We can set off after breakfast. After breakfast, Ren Baqian packed up his things and waited for someone to call them. After about 2 hours, Ren Baqian was a little impatient when Ling Ziquan finally arrived. Mr. Yi, everything has been arranged. Please follow me. As Ling Ziquan walked out, they realized that they were on the way to the mountain gate. When they were near the gate, they saw a large group of people in the distance. Mr. Yi, I have already arranged for someone to bring you there. There will be someone to take care of things along the way, so you don't have to worry. Zhang Changkong turned around and cupped his hands when he saw Ren Baqian. Thank you. Ren Baqian cupped his hands. Then the crowd split into two. In front of them were 6 horses in a rather gorgeous carriage, as well as the ox cart that Ren Baqian came with. Mr. Yi, let's cut to the chase. We will meet again in the future. Let's drink and chat merrily when we meet again. Zhang Changkong cupped his hands. Let's meet again. Ren Baqian cupped his hands, thinking that when they met again, they would probably want to swallow him alive. Since that was the case, it was better not to meet again. At least after staying at the Golden Ring sect for a night, he didn't have a bad impression of this place. Unfortunately, they were on different sides and were destined to be enemies. There was nothing much to say. Let's meet again. Everyone cupped their hands. Ren Baqian looked at the 2 carriages in front of him. Seeing that no one wanted him to get on the carriage, he got on his own ox cart. Then, 8 people came out from the crowd and got on their horses. 2 of them were responsible for driving the carriage. One of them was the elder in charge of external affairs, Ling Ziquan. As for the 2 people from the Nine Blades sect, he didn't see them. Mr. Yi, just let me know if anything happens along the way. Ling Ziquan smiled at Ren Baqian as he sat on the horse. His smile was complicated. Ren Baqian nodded, turned his head, nodded at Zhang Changkong and the rest, and entered the ox cart. When the ox cart started its journey, Ren Baqian began to ponder about the carriage behind. When he first saw it, he thought it was prepared for the 2 of them. He didn't expect it to be completely different, which made him feel a little strange. Could it be that there's something on this carriage? Ren Baqian's mind raced. Could it be that the dancers from yesterday were on it? He didn't know if that woman was among them. However, even if there was, he wouldn't dare to accept them. If he did, the Empress would skin him and hang him on the city wall to dry him like bacon. He was very clear about the Empress's temperament. If he went to a brothel to drink in Lan City, as long as he didn't go overboard, the Empress might turn a blind eye. Moreover, there was Tong Jinye, the old bastard, to take the blame for him. The Empress seemed to be more interested in beating him up. However, if he wanted to keep a mistress in his golden house, Ren Baqian thought for a while and didn't think too much about it. At most, he would ask Ling Ziquan to bring her back when they reached the destination. Whoever wanted her could have her, but he didn't dare to. They traveled all the way until noon, when everyone stopped to take a break. Ren Baqian had been paying attention to the movements of the carriage. Sure enough, when the carriage stopped, a hand reached out to the side and pulled open the curtain. A girl's face appeared from behind the curtain. It's really her, Ren Baqian thought. It was the girl from last night, whose eyes were as clear as the bottom of a lake, and who gave people the feeling that she was ignorant of worldly affairs. At this moment, she was wearing a light green dress and had her hair combed into a young girl's bun. Compared to yesterday, she looked more lively. Mr. Yi, father asked me to send you to Mount Tianyan. That girl imitated others and cupped her hands at Ren Baqian, following which she grinned innocently. Your father? Is he? Ren Baqian immediately caught this word. 3rd Mississippi. Ling Ziquan nodded at the girl and said to Ren Baqian, she is the youngest daughter of the chief. This time, she will accompany me to send Mr. Yi to Mount Tianyan. Rinpoche looked at that girl and couldn't wrap his head around it. Yesterday, Jean Chankong almost gave those dancers to him, right? Didn't that include her? Or did he misunderstand something? He must have misunderstood something. Yesterday, she shouldn't have been included. It was just the others. However, that didn't make much sense. The other girls from last night could only be said to be good-looking, nothing more. For Rinpoche, who was used to seeing the Empress and Li Yuanzhu, they weren't attractive at all. Compared to the flat-chested girl, Lin Xiaola, she was a little inferior. He really didn't expect that the chief of the Golden Ring residence would actually let his own daughter dance. Rinpoche pondered and felt that he might have misunderstood yesterday. Chapter 442. Mr. Yi, is it very big outside? Mr. Yi, how big is it outside? Mr. Yi, have you seen the sea before? What does the sea look like? What color is it? I read that there are no boundaries. Is that true? Mr. Yi. Since noon, Rinpoche had been hearing Mr. Yi in questions. Rinpoche couldn't help but ask, "Are you 100,000 wise?" Although Rinpoche said this, he didn't feel annoyed. This girl had a special quality that made it hard for people to hate her. Even if she asked some very childish questions, it would only make people feel that this was how she should be. What is 100,000 wise? Rinpoche was speechless. You will know when you see it with your own eyes in the future. It's better to see it with your own eyes than to hear it from others, Rinpoche replied. He had never seen the sea in this world. What if he said it was blue, but it was actually red, yellow, green, or black? There was also the Red Sea and the Black Sea on Earth. Although he had never been there and didn't know if they were really red or black, at least some parts of the Yellow Sea were indeed yellow, mainly because there was too much sand in the water and the seawater was turbid. I don't know when I can go out and take a look. Speaking of going out, Zhang Kaixian was a little distracted. She hadn't even gone far before, and the furthest she went was when she went to Mount Tianyun with her father. As for Tianjing Basin, she knew from a very young age that she couldn't go out because it was full of ferocious barbarians. Her father and the uncles in the residence all hated the barbarians. She was imperceptibly influenced from a young age, so she didn't hate the barbarians. She just wanted to go out and take a look. She heard that the outside world was very big and beautiful, even more beautiful than the Golden Ring residence. Zhang Kaixian was in a daze for a moment. Rinpoche looked at the side of her face before shifting his gaze elsewhere. Zhang Kaixian had the characteristics of immigrants from the Han Nation. Her forehead was very wide, her facial features weren't very exquisite, and her mouth was a little big. However, her facial features were just right on her face, giving people a breathtaking feeling. No matter who saw her, their first reaction would be that she was beautiful. Rinpoche didn't mind admiring her beauty, but he didn't want to get too close to her. Mr. Yi, is the Yun Nation very big? I heard them say that it's very prosperous, even more prosperous than Jaisai City. Zhang Kaixian only stayed quiet for a while before turning her attention to a new problem. After Zhang Kaixian asked a bunch of questions, she suddenly stopped and stared in one direction. After a few minutes, she ran over happily. Rinpoche was a little astonished at first. He looked at her and realized that she was chasing a butterfly. A journey that would normally take 8 to 9 days had taken Rinpoche and his group 12 days. On 2 of those days, Rinpoche returned to Earth, and there were other times when Zhang Kaixian chased butterflies and other insects far away. Even though Rinpoche tried his best to avoid it, he still became familiar with the girl named Zhang Kaixian after 12 days. After all, she was the kind of girl that was hard to guard against and hated. Even if they knew that they were enemies, they would gradually accept her. Even Lin Xiaola was very familiar with her. However, being familiar didn't mean that their relationship was good. On the contrary, there was a reason why their relationship wasn't so good. It happened on a sunny afternoon. When the flower fades, the green apricot grows small. When swallows fly, green water and people circle. The willows on the branches blew less and less. There are plenty of fish in the sea, a swing on the wall and a path on the other side. Passers-by outside the wall, while the beauty on the wall laughs. The laughter gradually subsides, and the sound gradually dies down. Amorous feelings are annoyed by heartless feelings. Rinpoche pulled open the curtain of the carriage and looked inside. He saw Jean Caixin poking her head out to look at the road on both sides. She was singing a song with a happy expression on her face. Jean Caixin's face was filled with joy. In fact, she was always happy. These days, Rinpoche saw happiness, cheerfulness, and vitality in her every day. It was as if the word worry didn't exist for her. The people who were traveling with her looked at her with doting eyes. Her cheerfulness also infected the others, and even the journey wasn't so boring. "Let's take a break," Rinpoche said to the driver as he stretched. After a while, the entire group stopped by the roadside. Next to them was a stretch of farmland. There were farmers doing farm work, and there were also children running on the small paths between the fields. The group stopped, and everyone dismounted from their horses to stretch their muscles. "Mr. Yi, what kind of clothes do people wear in the Yun Nation? Is it the kind you wear?" Jean Caixin jumped off the carriage, ran to Rinpoche's side, and continued to ask questions. However, after a few minutes, she saw a butterfly in the distance and ran over happily. Rinpoche felt that she probably knew martial arts, which could be seen from the way she got off the carriage. However, when she chased after the butterfly, she acted like an ordinary person. She didn't reveal any martial arts, and her movements were a little clumsy. After a while, Jean Caixin ran back from a distance with a big blue butterfly in her hands. She was very careful, afraid that she would damage the butterfly. Every time she got off the carriage, she couldn't help but catch the butterfly when she saw it. However, when she left, she would release the butterfly. "Look, it's so beautiful." Jean Caixin ran to Rinpoche's side and held the butterfly with both hands for him to take a look. "Very beautiful," Rinpoche echoed. Jean Caixin ran to Lin Xiaola's side and said, "Sister Lin, look. Oh, it's so beautiful." A gust of wind blew, and Jean Caixin's hands became empty. "Oh, it's not very delicious." Lin Xiaola smacked her lips and said with some regret. Jean Caixin was stunned. She opened her mouth wide and couldn't say a word for a long time. After a while, she realized that her butterfly had been swallowed by Lin Xiaola and quickly ran back to the carriage. "Did you do it on purpose?" Rinpoche watched her run back to the carriage before walking to Lin Xiaola's side and asking casually, "What on purpose? I really want to eat it, but it doesn't taste good," Lin Xiaola said lazily. Rinpoche didn't say anything else. However, when Jean Caixin got off the carriage at night, her eyes were a little red. It seemed like she had been crying in the afternoon. He wasn't sure if she was crying about the tragic fate of the butterfly or crying about her baby being eaten by Lin Xiaola. This was also the first time Rinpoche saw her look unhappy. The next day, Jean Caixin was full of energy again. However, she didn't go near Lin Xiaola anymore after catching the butterfly. When she released the butterfly, she would first check if Lin Xiaola had returned to the carriage and acted as if she was guarding against thieves. After 11 days of travel, Mount Tianyun was already in sight. "How much longer?" Rinpoche lifted the curtain and asked as he looked at the mountain in the distance. "Mr. Yi, we will arrive in 1 day." In Goose City, the Empress looked at the empty candy tree and was in a daze for a long time. Without the colorful candies, this was just a withered tree. After Rinpoche left, she would be alone. "Your Majesty, what do you want to eat for dinner?" Hong Wan asked from behind the Empress. "Your Majesty?" Hong Wan called out softly again. "What?" The Empress came back to her senses. "What do you want to eat for dinner?" "Up to you," the Empress replied faintly. After dinner, the Empress suddenly said, "Get ready. I want to go to Tianjing Basin tomorrow to take a look. I still don't know what kind of life the remnant citizens of the Han Nation are living under my rule and why they're always restless. Yes, I will inform Protector General Shi to make arrangements." "There's no need to inform him," the Empress stopped her. "I want to go and take a look myself and don't want to listen to his nonsense." "Your Majesty." Qing Yuan and Hong Wan were shocked, following which they asked, "Your Majesty, I will inform Deputy Commander Xiong." Chapter 443. 1 day later, Without Shi Huanya knowing, the Empress brought Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan to Langzhou City. With the Empress's skills, she naturally wouldn't be discovered if she wanted to avoid other people. It is said that this is a dragon vein that runs through the entire Tianjing Basin. The mouth of the dragon faces north, so it is said that Tianjing Basin can conquer the world, the Empress said as she looked at Langzhou City, which was not far away. Of course, she didn't believe in such things. Conquer the world? Who dares to touch my world? A group of people who were locked up here were still delusional. The Empress was still dressed in red, and Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were dressed in green. The three of them standing on the road were extremely eye-catching. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan carried a small bag on their backs that contained many important things, such as the Empress's erguo tu. There was also a change of clothes. The three of them arrived at the city gate and saw a long queue in front of them. Go and ask what's going on, the Empress said. Qing Yuan went forward for a while and returned. Your mistress, what is the entrance fee? The Empress frowned. Tianjing Basin was under her rule, so why didn't she know about the entrance fee? After thinking for a while, she didn't think too much about it. This would naturally be rectified in the future. Did you bring money? Qing Yuan, Hong Yuan, the two of them were at a loss. They had prepared a lot of things before coming, but they only thought about what the Empress needed. They were afraid that the Empress wouldn't like the food, so they packed some spices and forgot about the most important thing, money. After all, there was no place in the palace where money was needed. Money was something that was too distant for them. Your mistress, please forgive us. We forgot about the money. Shall we go back first? We will come back tomorrow after we withdraw the money. The two of them whispered nervously. The Empress raised her eyebrows. She never thought about these things when she went out with Rinpochian. If she didn't see the entrance fee at the city gate, she wouldn't even remember to use money. What would Rinpochian do if he encountered such a situation? The Empress recalled Rinpochian's style and then relaxed her frown. Forget it. Let's use another method. What method? Let's think of a way to enter the city first, then find a rich man and rob him. The Empress believed that if Rinpochian was here, he would definitely use this method. Both of them were stunned. Young miss, Her Majesty is going to rob money? If others knew about this, the two of them would definitely be cursed to death. That's settled then. Let's go to another place to enter the city. The Empress gestured for the two of them to pass through the fields near the city and find a remote place. Carrying one of them in each hand, they crossed a few hundred meters in a few seconds, crossed the city wall, and landed in the city. The Empress moved so quickly that the patrolling soldiers on the city wall didn't notice her at all. The three of them entered the city, passed through the alleys, and blended into the crowd. They looked around with great interest. Everything was new to them. The Empress was still fine, but Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were elated. Their attention had long been attracted by their surroundings, and they had completely forgotten that Her Majesty was preparing to rob them. However, even among the crowd, the three of them were extremely eye-catching. On one hand, it was because of their appearances, especially the Empress. On the other hand, it was because of their attire, especially the Empress. The Empress's bright red attire, coupled with her appearance, made it impossible for people not to notice her. The three of them were looking around, and the people around them were looking at them. The Empress quickly discovered this situation, but she didn't care. She didn't need to care about other people's opinions. In fact, there were many men who wanted to strike up a conversation. There were many merchants in Langzhou City, and there were also many rich people. Naturally, there were many people who had a stomach full of thoughts. However, the Empress's aura was too strong, and many people began to feel guilty after looking at her. As a result, the three of them actually didn't encounter any trouble. Young miss, the men are also wearing skirts. Young miss, look, that's a bone grinder. There are even bone knives there. I've never seen such a thing before. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were both excited. The Empress looked around while thinking about how to find Rinpochian. Like I shouldn't be in Langzhou City now, right? She didn't know where he had gone. The Empress felt that it was very important to find Rinpochian. Otherwise, there would only be two idiots by her side who knew nothing. With that guy around, at least she wouldn't have to think about robbing people. However, Tianjing Basin wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. There are more than 10 million people here, and it was really too difficult to find someone without a clue. The three of them walked around the city for half a day. After the initial novelty had passed, Qing Yuan and Hong Wan finally quietened down. The most important thing was that the two of them were starting to get hungry. The three of them had only eaten in the morning, and it was almost evening now. However, they didn't even bring any money with them, and they were too ashamed to tell the Empress that they were already hungry. The Empress heard their stomachs rumbling, but wasn't moved. After walking around the city for half a round, she had a rough idea. Generally speaking, the bigger the courtyard, the richer it was. Lead the way. Yes, the servant thought to himself. He didn't know where this big shot came from, but he was actually more dignified than the warlord. When the Empress followed the servant inside, someone finally discovered that the guard outside had been knocked out, and the front courtyard immediately became noisy. Then someone thought of the three ladies they had just seen and sent someone inside to report while searching the residence. At this time, the Empress had already arrived at the courtyard where the guest hall was located. She saw a room in front of her with 4 doors open, and she could see a few people sitting in the room talking. There were 2 men sitting at the top and 3 people sitting at the bottom of the table. "Warlord's son, I heard that someone from the Yin Nation is here," a man at the top asked. "Mr. Fong, you are quite well informed," a man in his 50s with a long beard replied with a smile on his face. In fact, he had just received this news. He knew that someone from the Yin Nation was passing through Longzhou City, but he didn't know about it. This made him feel that his subordinates were useless. "Warlord's son, do you know anything about their purpose?" the man called Mr. Fong asked. Warlord's son stroked his long beard. He couldn't possibly say that he hadn't seen them before, right? He only found out about such a person passing through 10 days after they left. As a warlord, he was afraid that he would be looked down upon if he didn't even know that someone like that had passed through his own city. Following which, he raised his head and saw a lady in red leading 2 ladies in green toward him under the guidance of a servant. He immediately frowned. Who was this person? Why didn't anyone inform him? When the Empress walked into the room, everyone looked at her with amazement in their eyes. The Empress was silent for a moment. She thought about the excuse she had prepared and felt that there shouldn't be any problem. She said coldly, "Robbery. Hand over the money." Everyone was immediately petrified. Chapter 444. City Lord Sun was so angry that he almost laughed after recovering from his shock. Robbing the city, Lord Manor? If it wasn't for the fact that the person in front of him didn't seem to be delirious, he would have suspected that the other party was suffering from hysteria. "How should I address you? If you lack travel expenses, as long as you ask, I can still give you a sum of money. There's no need to joke like this." City Lord Sun's voice was rather calm. After all, he had seen all sorts of things and wouldn't get angry easily. "Rob, take the money or die." The Empress was unmoved. She didn't have a good impression of these remnant citizens of the Han Nation. On the contrary, she loathed them. If it weren't for the original agreement, she would have killed all of them long ago. At this moment, he was only taking money and sparing his life. This was already a great gift from him. Hearing this, City Lord Sun's expression immediately turned ugly. He had already spoken politely. Could it be that the other party thought that he, the City Lord of Longzhou City, was easy to bully? Where did this madman come from to spout nonsense here? Before Lord Sun could speak, the person next to him couldn't stand it. The Empress's body swayed. "Pan!" The person who spoke immediately spurted out blood from his 7 orifices and collapsed to the ground. No one had expected that she would make a move just like that. The sudden turn of events shocked everyone once again. One by one, they stood up from their chairs in anger and wanted to pull out their weapons. Spirit wheel experts. Everyone stopped. However, Warlord Sun instantly realized the other party's strength. The other party's speed was so fast that he couldn't react in time. There was no other possibility that the other party was a spirit wheel expert. As soon as he said that, everyone felt as if they had been hit by a paralysis spell. Beads of sweat flowed down their foreheads. How could it be a spirit wheel expert? Was this woman a spirit wheel expert? "Senior, City Lord Sun rose to his feet and said hoarsely, "I don't know what Senior wants, but I'll do my best." At the end of the day, he still didn't quite believe that a spirit wheel expert would rob him. What was the status of a spirit wheel expert? In the entire Tianjin Basin, with a population of more than 10 million, there were only 13 famous spirit wheel experts. This was because the lifespan of a spirit wheel expert far exceeded that of an ordinary person. A spirit wheel expert would be treated like an ancestor no matter where he went. Why was there a need to commit robbery? Goldie. The Empress didn't know what Rinpochian was thinking. Her goal was very clear. Send someone to move all the gold from the vault here. City Lord Sun didn't expect that the other party would really only want money. However, he reacted quickly and immediately said to the servant who was paralyzed on the side. Ever since the Empress came in and said the first sentence, the servant was paralyzed. At this moment, upon hearing the order, he hurriedly got up and ran outside. The Empress wasn't afraid that they would play any tricks. It was just a matter of giving them another slap. These people wouldn't be able to create any trouble in front of her. "Senior, please wait a moment." City Lord Sun cupped his hands. The Empress ignored him, and the room became quiet. Everyone kept quiet out of fear and didn't dare to say a word for fear of angering the lady in front of them. It was obvious that this person was not a good-tempered person. "City Lord, someone has broken into the mansion." Castellan Sun looked at the guard who rushed in to report the news and expressionlessly waved his hand to chase him away. "Let's go. Inform everyone to do what they are supposed to do. The intruder is a senior." Everyone waited for the time it took for an incense stick to burn before heavy footsteps could be heard from outside. A few people carried 4 boxes into the living room and placed them on the floor. City Lord Sun took a few steps forward and opened the boxes. 3 of the boxes were filled with gold ingots, and the last box was filled with all kinds of gold and silver ornaments. "Senior, they're all here." Then he obediently stood to one side and said, "Senior, they are all here." The Empress tilted her head, and Qin Yuan and Hong Wan immediately went forward to open the bag. They picked up some gold ingots from the box and placed them inside. Then they looked at the gold ornaments. The ornaments were exquisitely made, and some were even inlaid with gems. Compared to the gold ingots, they were even more tempting. One of them packed a lot of ornaments until the bag was bulging. Only then did he stop. The Empress took a deep look at City Lord Sun. If this person's answer had been slightly off, she would have killed him with a slap. She didn't expect this person to be so quick-witted and let him escape with his life. This look made City Lord Sun break out in a cold sweat, but he still didn't dare to move. The Empress didn't say a word, turned around, and went out. Qin Yuan and Hong Wan hurriedly followed her, and their backpacks jingled as they walked. Phew! After the Empress left the courtyard, everyone heaved a sigh of relief and slumped into their chairs. This person is dressed in red, and she looks so young. Could she be? One of them was halfway through his sentence when everyone's expression changed drastically, and they hurriedly covered his mouth. "Even if you want to die, don't drag us down with you," someone beside him scolded in a low voice. With this kind of appearance, this age, and this kind of dressing, not only had he guessed her identity, but everyone else had also guessed it. However, no one dared to say it. If they said it, and that person heard it, they were afraid that no one here would be able to survive. That person shouldn't be here at all. If the news of her appearance were to spread, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. The entire Tianjin Basin would move upon hearing the news. Even though everyone didn't know why, that person had indeed appeared here. Furthermore, she was most likely the person that everyone was thinking of. A storm is about to arise. More than one person had this thought. After a while, everyone was finally relieved when they saw that that person didn't return. Warlord Sun, goodbye. The man who was previously addressed as Mr. Fong stood up and said. He had to bring this news back immediately. Warlord Sun didn't intend to keep him. He was still in a daze. Why did Qi Zixiao come here? Don't be fooled by the fact that they were pondering about how to mobilize their troops every day. When faced with Qi Zixiao, no one would not be afraid. After leaving the warlord's residence, Qin Yuan and Hong Wan asked, "Miss, where are we going now?" Their bellies were already deflated. "Let's eat," the Empress said faintly. The two of them looked at each other with joy in their eyes. After finding a restaurant, the three of them sat in a side room. The two of them then opened their backpacks and piled the gold jewelry on the table. "Miss, look, this bracelet is inlaid with 9 rubies. It's the most suitable for you. This necklace isn't bad either." While the two of them chattered away, the Empress looked out the window at the streets and pedestrians below. After the three of them had their meal, they casually found an inn to stay in. After arranging a room for Qi Zi Xiao, the innkeeper stood behind the counter and looked in the direction of the three of them. Her body trembled slightly. If someone were to see her at this moment, they would definitely be shocked by her expression. Her eyes were glowing, and the corners of her mouth were raised to an angle that was difficult for ordinary people to reach. "She's too perfect. I have never seen such a beautiful person. I really want to skin her and make her into a doll to keep. I'm so excited. The thought of collecting such a beautiful doll makes me unable to control myself. My saliva is about to flow out." After standing behind the counter for a long time, she finally found some tea leaves to brew. Then she added something else to it, following which she swayed her body to the second floor and knocked on the door. "Sir, would you like some tea? This is a good tea that I picked myself from the cliff." The Empress took a sip of erguo too and said, "Leave us. Don't disturb me without my instructions." Chapter 445. That night at the Yulai Inn, 2 figures appeared in the pitch-black lobby and quietly went up to the second floor. One of them took out a pipe and pierced through the window paper. Then he blew into the room forcefully, and a tube of powder was blown into the room. After blowing the knockout powder into both rooms, the two of them were relieved when they heard no sound from inside. The two of them were very confident in the intoxicating powder that they blew into the room. This powder was made from intoxicating flour and other ingredients after many years of research and development. It was very potent. An ordinary person would need 7 days to wake up after being poisoned by this powder. A man-will expert would need 3 days, and an earth-will expert would need more than half a day. Even a spirit-wheel expert would be slightly affected. One of them chuckled with a charming and sweet-sounding voice. The lady boss was very excited. Tonight, she would definitely be able to make a puppet that was worthy of being treasured. "Have you brought everything?" the lady boss asked excitedly. 16 skinning knives and 48 spirit needles. "Aren't they all in this box? Since you are in such a hurry, I'm afraid that you have found something good." "What good is there for me?" the other person said. It was a man's voice. "Good? You will know what good it is when you see her." The lady boss chuckled and pinched him. She had already decided that for this puppet, she would give up this inn and find another city to live incognito. Therefore, she didn't hesitate to make her move in the inn. She was afraid that something would go wrong along the way. A perfect puppet was her lifelong pursuit. What did she hear people say the last time? She could die in the evening if she heard the truth in the morning. She deeply agreed with this sentence. As long as she could make a perfect puppet, she had nothing else to ask for in the rest of her life. The man laughed, took out a small bottle, opened it, and sniffed it. Then, he pushed the door open. "Go in, don't just stand here." The lady boss was slightly dissatisfied when she saw that he didn't move after pushing the door open. However, the man's words made her expression change. "Why are you fine?" The man's voice was full of disbelief. This drunken powder was the result of many years of research. Even his master was knocked out by a packet of it. One had to know that his master was a famous poison expert in Tianjin Basin, but he was still knocked out by the drunken powder, let alone other people. He saw a woman in red sitting at the table in the middle of the room. She rested her chin on one hand and looked at the door with bright eyes. She did not look like she was drugged at all. "I would like to know what benefits there are." The Empress's tone was bone-chilling. The lady boss's expression changed several times before she scolded. "Useless thing. If the soft way doesn't work, then the hard way. We don't want this in anymore. Capture her and leave the city immediately." She then turned to the room and smiled. "You're unlucky to have met me. Who asked you to be so likable?" She then turned to the man beside her and said, What are you waiting for? Don't hurt her skin, or it won't look good. Right now, all she could think about was making a puppet. It was rare to encounter such a perfect material in her lifetime, and she couldn't care less about anything else. Under her urging, the man beside her scurried toward the room. His feet moved a few times on the ground, as if he was gliding. With a flip of his hand, a ray of light seemed to split the darkness in the room. It was a short knife that was 1 foot and 70 centimeters long. The gleam of the knife was like jade, but it wasn't the normal white color. The next second, the gleam of the knife appeared in front of the Empress's throat as if it was going to pierce through the throat of the woman sitting at the table. He was confident that as long as he touched it, the force would pass through the tip of the knife and shatter the other party's throat. At most, it would only leave a small mark. However, all these thoughts came to an abrupt halt in the next moment. His heart was beating wildly, and he was almost unable to control the panic in his heart. He only saw a pure white hand holding onto his knife. It was as if the knife had grown roots. No matter how much strength he exerted, it didn't move an inch. Almost at the same time, another figure flipped over his head and aimed a pair of short thorns at the Empress's eyes. The Empress's other hand tapped a few times in the air, and every time she tapped the tip of the short thorns, the lady boss only felt a strong force coming from her hand and sending her flying. According to the direction she was going, she was afraid that the top of the door would be sent flying, and the people in the inn would naturally wake up. At this moment, the Empress stood up, stretched out her hand at lightning speed, and pulled the lady boss back. She tapped one of their heads with her finger, and immediately blood spurted out of their orifices and fell to the ground. However, if one took a closer look, both of them were still alive. Only then did the Empress unhurriedly lit the lamp and close the door, following which she opened the box that both of them carried with them. Inside, there were 16 knives of different sizes. The big ones were the size of a palm, and the small ones were only the size of a finger. In addition, there were a bunch of bottles and 48 silver needles. The Empress held the needles in her hand, looked at the two of them, and then inserted them into their bodies one by one. As an Empress, the most important thing to do was to be fair. There couldn't be one more person, and there couldn't be one less person. Normally, these words were useless, but at times like this, they had to be used. After all 48 needles were inserted into the heads of the two of them, the Empress sized up the 16 knives of different sizes. Although they didn't speak directly, she clearly understood what the two of them said just now. The moment she heard about the skinning knife and the spirit needles, she knew what they meant. At this moment, she naturally wouldn't be lenient. Although the two of them were already half a step away from death, these things still had to be used on them. The Empress carefully arranged the 16 knives and then divided them into 2 parts of different sizes. When she felt that the 2 parts of the knives were about the same size, she inserted the knives into the bodies of the 2 of them. After doing all this, the Empress was in a much better mood. They really didn't know what was good for them to do with her. The last person who dared to do anything to her. Thinking about it carefully, she really hadn't met anyone who dared to do anything to her, especially when it was such a disgusting and infuriating idea. If it wasn't for the inconvenience of being outside, she would have hung the 2 of them to dry. After torturing the 2 of them, the Empress rummaged through the bottles and jars on their bodies. She didn't know what the 2 of them had blown into the room just now, but Qing Yuan and Hong Wan, who were next door, should have been poisoned as well. After sniffing the bottles one by one, the Empress felt a headache coming on. She didn't understand these things at all. At first, she didn't expect the 2 of them to have so many bottles and jars on their bodies. There were more than 10 bottles in the box, and there were still 7 or 8 bottles on their bodies. She didn't know which were the antidotes and which were the poison. Seeing that the 2 of them were still breathing, the Empress poured some of the 2 bottles into their mouths. The woman's face began to turn green, then purple, and finally, blisters began to appear all over her body. Her body also began to swell, and after a short while, yellow liquid began to flow out of her body. In a short period of time, she became a thin piece of human skin, and everything inside her body turned into pus. On the other hand, the body of the other person became brightly colored. Streaks of blood appeared on the surface of her body and then exploded. Finally, all that was left was a lump of flesh. After throwing the 2 bottles to one side, the Empress turned around and went out of the inn. She knocked out the waiter and the chef, and then brought them to another empty room. Only then did she bring the bottles and jars over for the 2 of them to test the antidote. The room just now was filled with the stench of blood and stench, and it was already unbearable to stay in. After tossing and turning for 2 hours, the Empress finally found the antidote. Even the livestock in the back of the inn were all dead. Chapter 446. The Empress gave the 2 of them the antidote and left the inn the next morning as if nothing had happened. However, Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were puzzled as to why the Empress had woken up so early and was actually waiting for them outside. Also, where were the inn owner and the child? The 2 of them had a headache as if they had been drunk. After the 3 of them left, the unforeseen event in the inn was quickly discovered, and the warlord's men surrounded the inn. However, the scene was a mess, and Warlord Sun began to doubt whether it was Qi Zixiao. After all, with her status, how could she do such a thing? However, an old man from the magistrate's office quickly cleared his doubts. From the boxes and medicine bottles scattered everywhere, as well as the waiter, cook, and the poultry and livestock in the backyard, it was obvious that the other party was testing medicine. In addition, the traces left in the 2 rooms were similar to the smell in one of the medicine bottles. After testing the effect of the medicine, the whole process came to light. Even Warlord Sun couldn't help but say, "Sins committed by heaven can be forgiven, but sins committed by oneself can't be avoided." However, despite saying this, Warlord Sun no longer doubted the identity of that person. Both Yu Dao and Feng Er were at the earth wheel level, yet they died so easily here. The other party was indeed a spirit wheel expert, as he thought. In that case, it had to be the person he was thinking about. At the thought of this, Warlord Sun wanted to praise himself for being smart and quick-witted. If not for his quick thinking, the warlord residence would probably be gone by now. He would go back and marry a concubine to calm himself down. Although he thought this way, he knew that a big change was coming. Tianyan Mountain stretched for hundreds of kilometers, and there were many rare treasures on the mountain. The highest peak of the mountain pierced through the clouds, as if it was connecting heaven and earth. Therefore, it was called Tianyan Mountain and was also the highest mountain in Tianjing Basin. Rinpochian already knew that there was an alliance in Tianjing Basin, but he only heard about it later. However, some things were only heard later. This alliance was called the Hidden Alliance, and it had only been formed in the past 20 years. The one who organized this alliance wasn't one person, but a group of people. A group of people who had rebelled against the Hao Nation and were defeated by the Aboriginals. They had no choice but to sign an agreement and be chased into Tianjing Basin. Initially, those people rebelled against the Hao Nation for the sake of their ideals or power, but they ended up in such a state. Some of them refused to give up after entering the valley and formed the 3 major factions of Tianjing Basin. A portion of them had no interest in fighting for power with them. Instead, they formed their own sects, wanting to pass down all their knowledge so that one day they could go out. There were also some who were completely disheartened and lived in seclusion. Many years later, a few of them ran around and gathered all the experts who lived in seclusion, forming the first secret alliance. At that time, Tianjing Basin was also in a state of chaos. Various factions attacked each other and wanted to annex the other factions to form an independent faction. They wanted to unify all the people in Tianjing Basin before fighting the Aboriginals. During that period of time, the people in Tianjing Basin had no way of making a living. After that, the secret alliance roped in the various sects and negotiated with the 3 major forces. That was how the current situation came about. However, although the 3 great forces seemed to have stopped fighting on the surface, in reality, they were still playing dirty tricks. After all, during that period of war, the 3 sides had also formed many personal grudges. However, there was still a sense of righteousness. In the face of righteousness, all parties tried their best to restrain themselves. At most, there would only be some small disputes, but there wouldn't be any large-scale wars. Currently, the Secret Alliance was nominally united with the three major forces and various sects to form an even larger alliance. They gathered their strength in Tianjing Basin and prepared for a future war. After understanding the history of the Secret Alliance, Ren Baqian couldn't help but admire them. He didn't admire the Secret Alliance, but Shiwanya. Such a large organization was created right under his nose, and he actually didn't know much about it. He could be considered a talent whose brain was full of muscles. If he didn't make this trip, he reckoned that this group of people could really stir up some trouble. After all, Tianjing Basin had been accumulating for so many years, and there were many practitioners. There were tens of thousands of man-wheel experts, hundreds of earth-wheel experts, more than 10 spirit-wheel experts, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers. If there were so many ants, they could even bite an elephant to death. If Tianjing Basin were to really become chaotic, Dayo would probably have to suffer a lot. In particular, the Northeast was at war with the Yun Nation. In the North, Great Xia was still unwilling to give up. In the Southeast, there was the Chun Nation, which no one knew what they were planning. With all these factors added up, Dayo was really doomed. When that time came, he would have to go to the 60,000 mountains with the Empress to farm and hunt, and his son would run around the village naked. Thinking about that kind of life, Rinpoche felt that it was better for them to die than for him. Unlike at the Golden Ring residence, when everyone arrived at the foot of the mountain, someone went up to report and soon came down to bring everyone up the mountain. They followed a small path, shuttled through the forest for a while, and finally passed through a kernel. What appeared in front of Rinpoche was a farmland and a village. It was the most ordinary kind of village in the mountains. There were hundreds of sparsely scattered houses in the village, and there were crooked fences made of wood outside the houses. Some of the courtyards even had bundles of firewood. If he didn't know his destination, Rinpoche would really find it hard to believe that this was where the Secret Alliance was located. Weren't they all so-called experts? At the very least, they should be more outstanding, right? For example, like Huang Yaosher, who planted peach blossoms and played the flute when he had nothing to do. However, looking at this old lady who carried 2 tall firewood into the village, she was too down to earth. Are you surprised? I was also surprised when I came here for the first time. Zhang Kaixian bounced to Rinpoche's side and looked up. Very surprised, Rinpoche answered truthfully. However, the grandparents here are very nice people. Zhang Kaixian grinned at Rinpoche, bounced to the front, and said, Grandma Hu, I'm here to see you. Girl, you're here again. The old lady looked to be in her 80s or 90s. She was carrying 2 tall firewood, but her movements weren't slow at all. She turned her head and smiled when she saw Zhang Kaixian running over. Do you need help? I can help you carry a small bundle. Zhang Kaixian deliberately stretched out a finger and gestured, indicating that it was a small bundle. Girl, you are still so considerate. My waist really can't carry it anymore. As the old lady spoke, she quickly reached out and pressed all the firewood on top of Zhang Kaixian's head. It's a small bundle. Zhang Kaixian quickly raised the firewood with both hands and watched as the firewood got lower and lower and was about to drown her. Although it was firewood, it was very dense and weighed at least 500 kilograms. How could she lift it? It could already be said that her skills weren't bad since she wasn't immediately pressed to the ground. The people from the Golden Ring residence quickly ran over to help, but by the time they rescued Zhang Kaixian, her head was already full of firewood. Rinpoche didn't say anything and slowly followed behind everyone toward the village with Lin Xiaola. At the entrance of the village, there was an old man with wrinkles all over his face, who was wearing traditional clothes, sitting in the shade and reading a book attentively. Seeing everyone come over, he raised his head and smiled at them. Only half of his teeth were left in his mouth. Come. Someone help me see if there's a second half of this book. I've already flipped through it several times, but I don't know if there's a second half. Grandpa Qiao, I will help you in a while. I have read a lot of books these days, so maybe I have read it before, Zhang Kaixian shouted while holding a bundle of firewood. You can't read it. You definitely haven't read it before. The old man quickly said, Why can't I read it? How do you know that I haven't read it before? Jean Cassien wasn't convinced. Men can read it, but women can't. Girls can't read it either. The old man shook his head. Chapter 447. Do you want to read it? The old man didn't show the book to Jean Cassien and asked Rinpochian instead. Thank you. Rinpochian happened to be interested in this world's erotic literature and had no reason to refuse. Seeing that Rinpochian readily agreed, the old man smiled like a chrysanthemum and said, You're a good person. You're much more sincere than those who obviously want it but say no. The surrounding people were speechless. Are those who read erotic literature with you a good person? Are those who go to the brothel with you blood-related brothers? Rinpochian happily took the book and even said politely, Thank you for sharing. This made the old man smile even more happily and praised. You're a good person. You have good taste and are polite. The others didn't understand, but Rinpochian did. Only an experienced person like him would understand such things. Looking at the major forums on the internet, there were trolls running amok everywhere. Just a casual sentence would cause people to spew a torrent of abuse. Everyone was filled with hostility. Only the netizens in 1024 all said, Thank you for sharing. The original poster is a good person. Good people will have a peaceful life. There was almost no hostility. Therefore, everyone was a good person. I'll take it with me then. I'll return it to you later. Rinpochian held the book in his hand and gestured. If you like it, you don't have to return it. You can return me a new one in the future. A treasure sword for a hero and a beauty for a beauty. The old man was very generous. However, Rinpochian still felt that something was wrong. A treasure sword for a hero, a beauty for a beauty, and erotic literature for Rinpochian felt that he shouldn't think about this in detail. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that the old man was scolding him. However, the old man was smiling like a chrysanthemum in full bloom and even gave him erotic literature. How could he let Lin Chala scratch his face? Rinpochian cupped his hands at the old man and put the book in his arms speechlessly. What's in the book? Let me see. Why can't women read it? Lin Chala came over curiously. You'll know in 50 years, Rinpochian said. After thinking about it, even though Lin Chala looked all right, she might not be able to get married. Maybe it would be another 100 years. When they entered the village, they would occasionally see old people sunbathing in the courtyard and watering the flowers. They were no different from the old ladies in the village. In any case, he saw a person drawing on a table in the courtyard. The person was squatting in a horse stance. One of his forearms was parallel to the table, and the brush in his hand was drawing on the paper from time to time. This person's every move looked very imposing, and Rinpochian finally felt that he had the demeanor of an expert. After all, the people here were all figures of the older generation who had survived the Great War back then. These experts weren't bumpkins, so it wasn't strange for some of them to be proficient in the four arts. Village Chief Grandpa, what are you drawing? Jean Cassien carried the firewood and jumped into the courtyard. Painting mountain, the old man said without raising his head. Jean Cassien stretched her neck to take a look at the drawing before turning her head to look at the nearby tall mountain. She said doubtfully, This mountain is a little fat. So majestic, a little short. He's accumulating momentum to break through the heavens one day. This is obviously a hill, right? This is called looking at the mountain, but not seeing it. Little girl, you talk too much. The old man flew into a rage out of humiliation. Even though Rinpochian didn't see what the old man was drawing, he understood that this person wasn't an ordinary person to be able to draw a mountain that pierced the sky like a hill. Rinpochian felt that this person had the demeanor for nothing, but it turned out that he was a soul painter. As he thought about it, he added, Soul painter. The old man had sharp ears, and his eyes lit up when he heard this. He laughed and said, This little fellow knows what's good and bad. The most important thing in painting is the soul, the intent, and not the form. Come, little fellow. My painting can only be seen by people with good eyesight. This old man is a spirit wheel expert, just a little weaker than me, Lin Chala added at the right time. She gestured with one hand, pointing to the sky, and the other pointing to the ground. Rinpoche felt that what she meant was the difference between heaven and earth. However, what did she mean when she said it was a little weaker and gestured like that? Little girl, you talk big. The old man was so angry that he almost laughed. I won't lower myself to your level today. Little fellow, come and take a look at my painting. The old man sized her up carefully and turned to Rinpoche. Finding someone who could appreciate his painting was much more important than fighting with others. Sorry to disturb you. Rinpoche walked to the table with his hands behind his back after he finished speaking. He had a strange look on his face. This isn't a hill. This is obviously a steamed bun with the outline of another steamed bun behind it. There's also a small stone drawn on the top of the steamed bun. How is it? The old man asked complacently, looking horizontally into a ridge and vertically into a peak. This poem immediately popped up in Rinpoche's mind. From a certain angle, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was an undulating mountain range. Good, well said. The old man immediately laughed when he heard this poem. This poem goes well with my painting. It suits the artistic conception. Is there a next line? Different heights, different distances. Not bad, not bad. The old man laughed as he added these two lines to the painting. Rinpoche felt that what the ancients said was right. Hooligans weren't scary, but a cultured hooligan. Not only was the person in front of him a cultured hooligan, but he was also a cultured spirit wheel hooligan. The little girl at the side was passively looking at the painting, looking horizontally into a ridge and vertically into a peak. She was still carefully studying the ridges and peaks in this painting. The old man then put the paintbrush aside. Seeing that Jean Caissien was still holding the firewood, he said, "Aren't you going to send the firewood to Hu Qinghua? Aren't you tired of holding it?" "Oh." Jean Caissien quickly nodded and seriously said to Rinpoche, "Your poem is really good." She then ran out with the firewood. The old man stretched out his hand and rubbed it twice before looking up at Rinpoche and asking, "This little fellow is a member of my sect." "Not bad, not bad. What's your relationship with Yi Sambwa?" Rinpoche's mind started to spin after hearing this. This old man knew someone with the surname Yi in the Yin Nation. That person was at least 70 years old. If he was still alive, he would probably be an expert. However, he hadn't heard of such a person in Qingfeng City. In that case, there were two possibilities. Either he was an expert from the older generation, or he was the ancestor of the warlord of Qingfeng City and was long dead. Or maybe it was the old man who deceived him. There were often such scenes on TV. If he climbed up the pole and said it was his ancestor, the old man would immediately laugh 3 times and then slap him to death. After thinking for a while, Rinpoche said, "I have never heard of this person. May I know how you know him?" The old man was silent for a moment before sighing and saying, "Is that so? I thought I had met an old friend. Time flies, and things remain the same, but people have changed. Come in and talk." The old man waved his hand and seemed to be in low spirits. Rinpoche felt that he might be overthinking, but there was no harm in being careful. After all, he was now in the hinterland of the enemy. If he succeeded, it would be easier to pacify Tianjing Basin in the future. If he was seen through, he would probably be hunted down. Chapter 448. The house was very simple and was made of ordinary wood. There was a bed, a wooden cabinet, and the place where the table should be was empty. Rinpoche guessed that it was the table outside. However, the most eye-catching thing was the head of a lion-like beast with 6 short horns hanging on the wall. The moment Rinpoche stepped through the door, the head suddenly opened its eyes. At the same time, the aura of a ferocious beast hit him in the face. It was as if the head in front of Rinpoche was no longer a head, but a ferocious beast that was more than 4 meters long that was about to pounce on him. The ferocity in the eyes of the ferocious beast and the threatening aura made Rinpoche have no doubt that he would be torn to pieces in the next second. Rinpoche felt as if his heart was firmly grasped by a big hand, and he subconsciously reached for his gun at the back of his waist. Gulp! A clear and crisp gulp came from the middle of the throat, and it sounded like a clap of thunder in Rinpoche's head. Rinpoche suddenly woke up from his hallucination and saw that the eyes of the head on the wall were still open. The eyes were completely black, like a pitch-black whirlpool that could suck in one's soul. Lin Shaola, who was beside him, was staring at the head on the wall, and her throat was still making gulping sounds. Looking at her hands carefully, he saw that her fingernails had grown by 1 centimeter. The old man carefully looked at Lin Shaola with some surprise. Then a muffled shout came from his chest. Silence. He flicked a steel nail from his hand and nailed it to the head of the beast. A roar was transmitted into Rinpoche's mind, following which the head closed its eyes, and Lin Shaola resentfully quieted down. Her eyes never left the head, and she secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. "Senior, this is—" Rinpoche couldn't help but ask. Although he had seen many things in this world, such as the elongation saber and the chain in his head, and he knew that he didn't know much about this world, the abnormality of this head still shocked him. It seemed as if this head was still alive. "Back then, I met a ferocious beast in the 60,000 mountains with my master. It has been so many years, but it still hasn't settled down." The old man glanced at the head on the wall with a look of reminiscence in his eyes. "It's still alive?" Rinpoche cried out involuntarily. "How can he be alive like this?" The old man asked with a smile. There was no body, only a head hanging on the wall. No one knew how many years had passed, and no matter how one looked at it, it could not be more dead. However, whether it was the opening of its eyes or the roar, he had just experienced it personally. "What happened just now?" Rinpoche asked doubtfully. "He's dead, but not dead," the old man said lightly. "Can I trade that with you?" Lin Shaola pointed at the head, her eyes shining. "Oh. What do you want to exchange for it?" The old man laughed. "This one is much more valuable than yours." Lin Shaola reached in her tube top and took out 3 white rabbit creamy candies that carried her body fragrance. Judging from her expression, she seemed to be in pain. 3 white rabbit creamy fruits was her limit. "What is this?" The old man looked at the thing in Lin Shaola's hand curiously. He had never seen this thing before. Rinpoche silently grabbed the 3 white rabbit creamy candies from her hand and placed another 3 in her hand. Although she was a hard-working girl, he felt embarrassed to see her being taken advantage of like this. "My 3 are a little bigger. Give me another one." He didn't expect Lin Shaola to turn around and raise an objection. Rinpoche was speechless. He silently took the 3 candies from Lin Shaola and placed the warm one back into her palm. He couldn't be bothered with her. "Creamy candies are delicious. You definitely won't be able to find them anywhere else," Lin Shaola said confidently to the old man. "Forget it. This thing is dead, but not dead. It's useless for you to take it." The old man shook his head. "Let's have a fight. If I win, give me that." Lin Shaola saw that the exchange had failed, so she immediately changed to snatching it. However, this was exactly what she wanted and saved 3 white rabbit creamy fruits. "What do you want that Jishue's head for?" The old man was a little puzzled. "It looks delicious." Lin Shaola was almost drooling as she looked at the head. "Are you ready? I'm going up." Lin Shaola even reminded him out of goodwill. The old man was speechless. "Let's go out. I also want to see what an expert who is just a little more powerful than me looks like." The old man gestured with his hand. It seemed like he hadn't forgotten the difference between heaven and earth that Lin Shaola had just said. Lin Shaola's body gracefully leaped and landed in the courtyard. The old man smiled at Rinpoche before walking out unhurriedly. As soon as Rinpoche followed him out, he saw 2 figures colliding. Their figures couldn't be seen clearly at all, as if 2 gusts of wind had collided. The sound of bodies colliding was constantly heard in the air. As soon as the fight started, more than a dozen figures suddenly jumped out of the village and landed around the courtyard. All of their faces were wrinkled, and some of them couldn't even straighten their backs. These were the experts who had survived until now. After sensing that there was a fight here, they ran over to watch the fight. In less than a minute, a scream was heard. It was from the old man. Rinpoche was finally relieved that Lin Shaola didn't suffer a loss. "Stop! I don't want to fight anymore." After a while, the old man shouted again. His figure gradually turned from illusory to solid as he stood there. The old man's clothes were tattered, his face was scratched, and he had a complicated look on his face. He wasn't a weakling among the spirit wheel experts and was one of the top experts in Tianjing Basin. Losing to a young girl made him look bad. However, what was worse was the other party's methods. Why was she scratching people? She even scratched people's faces. Didn't she know not to hit people in the face? Originally, even if the old man lost, he would only say that the younger generation would surpass the older generation. At most, he would be shocked, guess the origin of the other party, and feel disappointed. He had to admit that he was old. At such a young age, even if she started cultivating in her mother's womb, how could she be so powerful? However, at this moment, he didn't have any other thoughts. His mind was filled with, who did this girl learn from? Why was she scratching people? Everyone looked at the situation in the courtyard, looked at Lin Xiaola, who was licking her claws, and then looked at the old village chief with ugly expressions. Qing Yun's sword, who had dominated the world for many years, was defeated by a little girl, just like that? Where was the Qing Yun sword who had dominated the world with his sword? Qing Yun's sword? Oofed. Your old bones are about to be buried in the ground. A tall old man with white hair and beard had a complicated look on his face. Finally, he cursed bitterly and leaped more than 30 meters away. After a few steps, he couldn't be seen anymore. Another old man shook his head and sighed. We are old. We are all old. More people turned around and left with complicated looks on their faces. Qing Yun's sword was the name of the old village chief back then. It was a name that suppressed many people and was also a symbol of an era. Today, he was defeated by a young man, which made everyone feel a little sad and disappointed. The old man opened his mouth for a long time. After a while, he touched his face and said with a gloomy expression, "Can't we not scratch our face?" Ren Baqian was speechless. It seemed like being scratched on the face was more unacceptable to him than being defeated. The old man's lips moved a few times before he sighed faintly and said, "Back then, I was also handsome, elegant, and outstanding. It was all because of this face." Chapter 449. 2 hours later, Ren Baqian and Lin Xiaola sat by the fire. Ren Baqian held a stick in his hand and roasted the Jishue's head over the fire. Lin Xiaola was in charge of drooling, which flowed down her chin, neck, collarbone, and onto the plains. Her eyes were dull and drooling, and she looked exactly like a mentally disabled child. But every time the eyes on the head began to move, she would slap them and return to her previous appearance as a mentally disabled child. The old man sat not far away, and a sense of sorrow rose from the bottom of his heart. This mentally disabled little girl had scratched his face. Beside him was Zhang Kaixian. She sat on the steps with one hand, supporting her chin as she looked at the beast's head being roasted over the fire. Why isn't this thing cooked yet? Ren Baqian felt that his hands were sore. He had been roasting it for more than an hour, but there were no signs of it being cooked. If it were that simple, why would I have suppressed it here for decades? You can forget about roasting it in this lifetime. The old man heard Ren Baqian's doubts and immediately raised his head, looking like an expert giving advice. What should I do then? Ren Baqian asked shamelessly. If it were alive, you wouldn't be able to do anything. However, it died a long time ago and isn't completely dead yet. Just soak it in the juice of the three-way flower for 3 days and start a fire with Phoenix wood to roast it, the old man pointed out. How about eating it raw? Ren Baqian thought about it and felt that it was too troublesome, so he turned his head and asked Lin Xiaola. Lin Xiaola pursed her lips. On the one hand, she felt that this thing tasted better when it was cooked, but on the other hand, she didn't want to wait too long. She had a strong appetite when she saw this thing. If she had to wait for another day, her saliva would flood the village, let alone 3 days. Village chief grandpa, do you have the three-way flower and Phoenix wood here? Zhang Kaixian asked the old man. How can you find them here? These things can only be found in the 60,000 mountains. Even in the 60,000 mountains, I'm afraid that you won't be able to find them without 2 to 3 years. Furthermore, you won't be able to chew them raw. Back then, even my master had to expend a lot of effort to kill this thing. The old man shook his head. After hearing this, Lin Shaola didn't hesitate any longer. She immediately took the Jeshua head out of the fire and began to gnaw on it. It made a crunching sound as if she was gnawing on wood, and Rinpochian felt his teeth ache just from hearing it. Roar! Another furious roar appeared in everyone's mind. It was as if Jie Shui's head was letting out an unwilling roar. Lin Shaola gave it a backhand slap and continued to chew. With a smile on his face, the old man calmly looked at Lin Shaola, gnawing on the fruit, as if he could already foresee the result of her failure. No matter what, he had finally vented his frustrations. Then, everyone watched helplessly as Lin Shaola bit off a piece of skin from Jie Shui's head. Hiss! How is that possible? The old man's eyes widened. He had heard about this world puppet from his master. It was said that it was impervious to swords and spears, impervious to fire and water, and difficult to injure with great strength. Even his master had spent a great deal of effort to kill this Jie Shui. Even after so many years, he couldn't do anything to Jie Shui's head. His Qingyun sword could be considered a treasure sword that could cut through iron as if it were mud, and it only produced sparks when he slashed at it. However, this little girl could actually bite it. Her teeth were sharper than the Qingyun sword. Then, the old man's gaze suddenly became sharp as he stared at Lin Shaola. Rinpochian immediately became vigilant. Sure enough, she isn't a human. I initially thought that she had practiced some special martial arts, but it turns out that she isn't a human, the old man said coldly after looking at her for a while. What do you mean? Rinpochian's heart skipped a beat when he saw his expression. Don't play dumb, the old man said coldly. Then he stared at Lin Shaola for a while before sighing and saying, Forget it, I can't care about this anymore. What do you mean, senior? I really don't know, Rinpochian said as he thought that he might be able to find out about Lin Shaola's origin from this old man. It's useless to say more. Good luck. The old man didn't want to talk about this matter anymore. Although he didn't speak anymore, his expression became much colder. Rinpochian knew that the old man definitely knew something. Seeing that the old man wasn't willing to say more, Rinpochian frowned and wondered how he could get more information out of the old man. In fact, the old village chief didn't know much. Back then, his master had just broken through to the spirit wheel level and went to the 60,000 mountains, but he returned with serious injuries. Before he died, he said that those who weren't stronger than him shouldn't go to the depths of the 60,000 mountains and should be careful of those who looked like humans but weren't. Previously, he didn't understand why, but now that he saw Lin Shaola, he suddenly remembered his master's words. This was related to the truth of his master's death, so he naturally wanted to know more. However, the battle with the Aboriginals was imminent, so he forcibly suppressed his thoughts. He had also made up his mind that after this battle, he would capture this woman no matter what price he had to pay and interrogate her about what was hidden in the depths of the 60,000 mountains. After the old man calmed down, he raised his head and asked Rinpochian, Tell me your purpose for coming here. Rinpochian repeated what he had said at the Golden Ring residence. I have 3 requests. First, you have to strengthen your attacks and attract the attention of the Aboriginals. Secondly, they didn't have enough weapons. Thirdly, she has to follow us. The old man pointed at Lin Shaola and said, Shiwanya isn't easy to deal with. Experts of the same level aren't his match in a one-on-one fight. Her skills are pretty good, and if she makes a move, she will be able to delay Shiwanya for some time. We can then surround and kill the other 2 Cardinal Heaven experts in the army. I can promise you the first and third requests, but the second one is a little troublesome. It's not easy to transport weapons from the Yun Nation, and now we're at war. It won't be easy to transport a large number of weapons over. It will consume a lot of manpower and resources, and it will be easier to be discovered, Rinpochian said after pondering for a while. That's your problem. After all, if you guys were to go against the ancient race alone, I'm afraid you wouldn't be able to hold on for long. If you want us to risk our lives, you have to show us something the old man said coldly. Rinpoche retorted, Great Xia is here too, right? I wonder where he is. What conditions did he promise you? Also, without us, you guys won't be able to do anything. We can totally wait for them to attack Wang Jing and delay the line of soldiers before making a move. The pressure we have to face is almost the same as if we were to make a move now, the old man said. As for the Great Xia people, that's between us and them. The Aboriginals are training new soldiers, Rinpoche reminded him. Their target is definitely you guys. All right, I promise you that I will find a way to transport the weapons over within 3 months. You guys must make a move after 3 months, Rinpoche said after pondering for a while. In fact, none of these 3 conditions could be fulfilled. However, they had to put on a good act. That's settled then. There are empty houses in the village. You guys can stay there for the night. The old man threw these words and returned to his room. At night, Rinpoche and Lin Shaola sat in an empty room. Lin Shaola was still gnawing on the Jiesu's head. When there was no one around, she suddenly looked up and said, Should I go and kill him? He's hostile. Continue gnawing on your Jiesu first. Now isn't the time yet. Rinpoche waved his hand and looked at Lin Shaola, who continued to gnaw on the Jiesu's head. Looking at the old man's big reaction, this guy in front of him had a lot of secrets. There were also a lot of secrets in this world. The thing in the belly of Mount Liote, the unknown location of the Sword Mountain, the mystery of the disappearance of the previous 2 emperors, and now, the origin of Lin Shaola. Chapter 450. Early in the morning, Rinpoche stood at the entrance of the village and looked into the distance. A few youngsters were practicing martial arts there. Some of them were practicing swordsmanship and fists. These were the disciples of the elders in the village. After all, those elders were active experts 70 years ago. Many of their lifespans were nearing the end of their lifespans. In order not to bring all their knowledge to the earth, they tried to find a successor to pass on their legacy. Rinpoche watched from the side for a long time. The martial arts of these youngsters were very different from the Fist of Death that he had learned. Compared to their martial arts, the Fist of Death was more direct, more open, and more suitable for killing on the battlefield. It also fully displayed the strength of the Aboriginals. On the other hand, their martial arts were completely based on the martial arts of Jianghu. They were more inclined to maneuver in a small area, fight one-on-one, and use more feints. Another important point was that their moves looked good. At least, they looked very elegant when they moved. Unlike the Fist of Death, which only had Black Tiger steals the heart, it didn't look as good as their martial arts. When used by the Aboriginals, the Fist of Death was completely overpowered and powerful. However, Rinpoche didn't have the strength of the Aboriginals, so the power of the Fist of Death was much weaker. Rinpoche felt that if he were to fight against these youngsters, he might not be their match. At the thought of this, Rinpoche felt even more miserable. Not only could he not defeat a 10-year-old Lolita, but he might not even be able to defeat a random cat or dog. How could he endure this? On the contrary, the set of boxing techniques that the Empress taught him was the most suitable for him. It had a strange style and was completely aimed at killing people. Many of the moves were imitations of the movements of beasts pouncing on human experts. This set of boxing techniques was completely used to hunt people. It was a pity that the movements of this set of boxing techniques were too difficult. Many of the movements were very strange and didn't conform to human bone structure and strength. At that time, he saw the Empress execute it smoothly, but when it was his turn, he simply couldn't execute many of the movements, let alone practice it. Up until now, he still couldn't execute all the movements and still focused on practicing the Fist of Death. Brother Lin, this move of yours is wrong. You have to move it downwards by 30%. Sister Hua, this move of yours is missing 2 sword flowers. You have to exert more strength on your wrist. A clear and melodious voice sounded. The little girl, Zhang Kaixian, ran back and forth to help everyone give pointers on the moves. It was hard to believe that Zhang Kaixian, this little girl, was actually better than these people in terms of martial skills. These elders liked Jean Saixian's character very much. When she came last time, many elders passed on a few cultivation techniques to her. Her innate talent was also pretty good, and there were many areas where she practiced better than the disciples of these elders. After staying here for 2 days, she was sent by those elders to correct the mistakes of these disciples in their moves. If it was someone else doing this, they would definitely be hated by others. I practice every day, and you only learn a little. Yet, you're actually better than me. How can I not be angry? However, Jean Saixian's innocent and romantic personality made people unable to hate her even if they wanted to. Ren Baqian stood at the side for a long time. He wanted to give it a try. After all, he had never fought with someone who was at the same level as him, and he didn't know what level he was at. However, when he thought about the 2 sets of fist techniques he could use, he could only give up on this idea. The killing fist was too obvious. He couldn't use the fist techniques of the Aboriginals at all. The other one was the tortoise fist. After thinking about it, he gave up on this idea. After eating breakfast, Ren Baqian was ready to leave. He still had to go down the mountain to inform the Yun Nation to transport the weapons over and prepare to look at the other cities. When Ren Baqian found the old village chief's house, more than 20 elders were actually sitting in the courtyard. There's no need to say anything. If we kill her, they will definitely be in chaos. Even if there will be a cleansing and revenge, how can there be no deaths in war? The tall, white-haired elder that Ren Baqian saw before said. His white hair fluttered even though there was no wind, and he looked imposing. Over the past 2 days, Ren Baqian had also learned the name of this elder. He was called the Celestial Hound. It was said that once he set his sights on someone, he would bite them like a dog and not let go. Furthermore, he had a bad temper and even dared to roar at the heavens. That was why he had such a name. However, most people didn't dare to say this in front of him. Otherwise, he would not rest until one of them died. The old dog's words are correct, another elder said as he knocked on the bamboo cane in his hand. This is a good opportunity. Don't hesitate, another elder said. Shiwanya will definitely take revenge, and I don't know how many people will die. That's a matter for the future. Just like what the old dog said, how can there be no deaths in war? We can't miss this opportunity. Contact all the experts at the Earth Wheel level and above. No matter how powerful she is, she's just one person. I don't believe that the entire Tianjing Basin can't kill her alone. Ren Baqian walked to the door and stopped. Everyone's conversation was heard by him. Who are they trying to kill? From what they said, it should be the higher-ups of the Aboriginals. Otherwise, they wouldn't have involved Shiwanya and said things like crazy revenge. The person they wanted to kill was also very powerful, to the extent that it was boundlessly powerful. They needed to gather all the experts in Tianjing Basin to besiege and kill her. At this thought, Ren Baqian was stunned. There was no need to think about it. Besides the Empress, there was no one else who met these conditions. But what was the situation now? Was the Empress in Gu City or somewhere else? Both of you, come in, the old village chief, Qing Yun's sword, said in a clear voice. Ren Baqian calmed himself down and said, I see that everyone is discussing something. I don't know if I'm disturbing you. Come in and talk, Qing Yun's sword said. Ren Baqian and Lin Xiaola stood at one side. Lin Xiaola was still holding the Jie Shui's head, which was almost half the size of her body. After 2.5 days, she had gnawed more than half of it. What was visible was the purplish-red, shriveled flesh and white bones. It looked very horrifying. There's a piece of news that has just arrived. It's very important to us and to all of you. You need to take action too, Qing Yun's sword said after glancing at Lin Xiaola. Please. Ren Baqian cupped his hands, but his heart tightened. Qi Zixiao appeared alone in Tianjing Basin. How can that be? Although Ren Baqian was already prepared, he still couldn't help but be surprised after hearing what the other party said. Why would the Empress appear alone in Tianjing Basin? What was she doing here? Qing Yun's sword felt that Ren Baqian's reaction was very normal. He was also surprised when he heard this news. After all, the Empress of Dayo actually came to Tianjing Basin alone. It was indeed puzzling. Of course, she wasn't alone. There were 2 maids by her side, but in everyone's eyes, she was alone. Rinpoche already knew their plan, but he still asked subconsciously, "You guys are preparing to?" "That's right. Gather all the experts and besiege her. Therefore, we need all of you to contribute," Qing Sword said in a deep voice as he looked at Lin Xiaola. His target was Lin Xiaola. As for Rinpoche, it wasn't that he looked down on him, but he was really a piece of trash in terms of martial arts. That's how it should be. Seeing that Qing Sword had made his decision, the Celestial Hound immediately slapped its thigh and laughed heartily. "Even if I die there, it will be worth it." Besieging and killing the fifth most powerful expert in the world and the Empress of Dayo was a big deal. Chapter 451. Everyone discussed for a long time before returning to their residences. In less than an hour, 7 or 8 elders left the hidden village with lofty sentiments. Needless to say, they were calling their friends and inviting people to come out of the mountains. Those who were personally sought out by this group of old fellows were definitely not ordinary people. These old fellows went out to look for experts who lived in seclusion. In addition to those experts who lived in seclusion, there were also the 3 major powers and various large and small sections. Those who participated in this siege were all experts at the Earth Wheel level and above in Tianjin Basin. If it weren't for the inconvenience of mobilizing so many experts and the fact that the Empress's whereabouts weren't fixed, they would have arranged for a large number of ordinary elite soldiers and man-wheel experts to wear down the Empress's strength. Under the circumstances where the Empress's whereabouts were uncertain, only experts could reach the destination in the shortest time possible. Something big has happened. This was the only thought in Rinpoche's mind. Why did the Empress come to Tianjin Basin? Originally, Rinpoche wanted to get some weapons to stabilize them and enter their ranks to understand their entire plan. When the time came, he could make targeted arrangements and eliminate all of them in one fell swoop. However, all his plans have been disrupted. Why did the Empress come to Tianjin Basin? She didn't bring any guards and only brought Qing Yuan and Hong Wan. The Empress wasn't a god. Although she was very powerful in Rinpoche's eyes, even the 5th most powerful expert in the world wouldn't be able to escape if she was surrounded by hundreds of Earth Wheel experts and more than 10 Spirit Wheel experts. After all, ants could kill an elephant if there were too many of them. The boss had to be defeated by a group of people. What should he do next? The best way was naturally to find the Empress and leave Tianjin Basin. However, it wasn't easy to find the Empress in Tianjin Basin. Even in a city, he would brush past her, not to mention that he only knew the approximate area. Finding the Empress was like looking for a needle in a haystack, so it was better to follow the main force. Then what? The Empress and Lin Xiaola, along with him, Qing Yuan and Hong Wan, who were burdens, faced countless experts. No matter how he thought about it, there wasn't much of a chance of victory. As for himself, he really couldn't help much. 4 Earth Wheel experts, conventional weapons weren't of much use, let alone Spirit Wheel experts. Nuclear bombs? Let's not talk about whether or not they could obtain those things. Even if they could, they would perish together. Poisonous gas? It seemed feasible. However, after thinking about it, he was an outsider and surrounded by experts. If he took out a bunch of bottles, it would definitely arouse suspicion. When that happened, he would be slapped to death. Furthermore, the speed at which the poison spread was too slow. Those experts were fast and had strong resistance to poison, so it was impossible for them to poison more than a few people. Using poison had the same problem as using nuclear bombs, which was that it was not easy to get their hands on such weapons of mass destruction. Apart from these, he could not think of any other method that would be useful in such a case. In this situation, there were not many weapons on Earth that could be of use. His last resort was to bring everyone back to Earth and hide for 5 days. He would wait for the Empress to kill a batch of them first. At the crucial moment, he would bring everyone back to Earth to recuperate for a few days before returning. However, it wasn't easy to grasp the timing. With so many experts fighting, the situation could change in an instant. He had to bring along the Empress, Qing Yuan, Hong Wan, and Lin Shaola. One could well imagine the difficulty of this task. Forget it. Presumably, there was still some time before they could gather enough people to reach the target area. He would think about other methods during this period of time. Rinpochian felt a headache coming on. He simply wanted to sigh. Your Majesty, didn't you stay in Gu City? Even if you wanted to come to Tianjing Basin, you should have brought more people with you. Rinpochian turned his head and saw that Lin Shaola was still gnawing on her lion head. It has been more than 2 days. Don't your cheeks hurt? However, Rinpochian felt that her face was a little too big. Could this be the legendary gills? Lin Shaola scratched people's faces for no reason. Rinpochian really suspected that she was related to cats. If she was really a cat girl, then it would be logical for her to be tanned. When she was done gnawing, he would be able to see her bun-like face. They want to kill Her Majesty. Don't you have anything to say? Rinpochian looked at her happily gnawing and couldn't help but ask. What? Lin Shaola looked up in a daze. They want to kill Her Majesty. Why? Where? Who? Lin Shaola's reaction was almost a replica of who she was, where she was, and what she was doing. Nothing. You can continue gnawing. Rinpochian covered his head. That afternoon, Rinpochian returned to Earth. At night, when the moon rose, the figure of the old village chief, Qing Yun's sword, appeared outside the courtyard. Is Mr. Yi in? No. Lin Shaola gnawed on the lion head while speaking vaguely. Where did Mr. Yi go? Qing Yun's sword was a little puzzled. He should be in the room at this time. Lin Shaola put down the lion head and tilted her head to think for a long time. In the past, Rinpochian had told her how to deal with such a situation. What did he say again? After thinking for a long time, Lin Shaola finally remembered something. Her voice was full of dissatisfaction and anger as she said, What time is it now? Do you have any civility to disturb me at such a late hour? Wait for me to go out and beat you to death. The last word was extremely charming and full of twists and turns. In addition, when she was gnawing on the lion head, she mumbled something. Qing Yun's sword's thoughts immediately went astray. I'm sorry, Mr. Yi. Come to my room tomorrow when you wake up, Qing Yun's sword said, flicked his sleeves, and left quickly. After walking for more than 100 meters, Qing Yun's sword looked up at the sky as if he was looking at his lost youth. The next morning, Rinpochian came back with an arrow on his back. He was thinking that with so many people around, the Empress might not be able to see him. If he played pomp and circumstance, his voice would be very recognizable. Needless to say, the Empress would know where he was. In addition, there was a pile of fortified smoke bombs. The main thing was that he didn't know what to bring. After thinking about it, he thought that this thing might come in handy, so he prepared some first. When he came back, he looked at Lin Shaola and felt that her face seemed to have grown a little bigger. Soon after, he opened the door, sat in front of the room, and tuned the strings. Then, he played pomp and circumstance. After a series of short notes, the moans of the eru reached everyone's ears. Damn it, what's that sound? Xiao Tianquan, who was wiping his weapon in the room, cursed. Why does this sound so weird? Who's playing this instrument? I want to slap him to death. A series of curses sounded within the range of Rinpochian's eru. However, there was still someone squatting in front of Rinpochian, holding her face with both hands and listening attentively. After Rinpochian finished playing pomp and circumstance, he immediately felt refreshed. Sure enough, I'm an eru player who was held back by my studies. What's this? It's very nice. Zhang Kaixian squatted at the entrance of Rinpochian's courtyard and said. Rinpochian's spirits immediately rose. Thinking about how his eru was suppressed in front of the palace, Rinpochian always felt heartache. Now, he finally had a soulmate. Can you teach me? Zhang Kaixian asked again. Sure. Rinpochian nodded and agreed without hesitation. Rinpochian now felt that this little girl in front of him was becoming more and more pleasing to the eye. A soulmate was hard to find. Chapter 452. There were more than 10 households in Pingfeng Valley. Smoke rose from the chimneys at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. An old woman with a walking stick and a young girl stood at the entrance of the valley for a long time before slowly walking down. Master, is the person who lives here very powerful? The young girl wanted to help the old woman, but she was stopped by the old woman. It's fine at home, but don't do this outside. I'm not so old that I can't walk, the old woman replied. Then, he answered, if it weren't for the continuous battles that damaged his foundation, I'm afraid he would have already attained the spirit wheel level. With his talent, how could he be stuck at the earth wheel level without any progress? As he spoke, he seemed to see that shy youth who always carried a paper umbrella on his back and had dimples when he smiled. At that time, she was around 20 years old and was in her prime. Unfortunately, fate made fools of people. So powerful. The young girl stuck out her tongue. There were only 13 spirit wheel experts in the entire Tianjin basin. This person must have been a famous person back then. The old woman walked very slowly, as if she was admiring the scenery on both sides and adjusting her mood. Following a small path, they walked for a full hour before they reached the entrance of the village. When the children saw strangers, they looked at them curiously before dispersing. Only a naked boy with a ponytail and a runny nose was left. He ran up to the two of them, wiped his nose with his dirty fingers, and asked, "Who are you looking for? Who are you looking for? Does Chang Tian live here?" The old woman asked with a smile. "There's no such person," the child replied after thinking for a while. "Oh." The old woman nodded and walked forward. "I already said that there's no such person. What else do you want?" The child asked curiously as he followed the two of them. He raised his hand and wanted to grab the young girl's clothes. The material of the clothes wasn't what the villagers wore, but he hesitated. When the young girl saw his actions, she quickly moved to the other side of the old woman. If she was grabbed by his running hand, she would lose her clothes. "As long as he's not dead, he's here. Even if he's dead, I want to see his grave." The old woman replied first, then turned to the young girl beside her and asked, "Are you going to sell me out so quickly?" "Master, I was wrong." The young girl quickly lowered her head and turned to the other side of the old woman. A hand covered in snot suddenly grabbed the hem of her skirt, causing her face to twitch. She looked like she was about to cry. So soft. The child touched the skirt enviously, then quickly ran into the village. "Run, Grandpa Chong. An old monster is coming to take you away." The old woman's firm footsteps suddenly came to a halt, and a sullen expression appeared on her face. However, it quickly dissipated and was replaced by a light and joyful feeling in his heart. He was indeed still here. A moment later, she stopped in front of a door and saw an old man sitting in the courtyard, pasting paper on an umbrella. The old man looked to be in his 60s. His white hair was combed behind his head. He was concentrating on the work at hand. When he finished, he put the umbrella aside and looked up at the old woman with a smile. "Long time no see." Dozens of years, countless thoughts. And in the end, it all turned into a single sentence. "Long time no see. You've broken through?" The old woman's face lit up with joy. "Yes, I originally wanted to repair my foundation, but no matter how much effort I put in, it was all in vain. Eventually, I gave up and worked here every day to feel everything around me. I didn't expect to break through. Life is still unpredictable," Chang Tian said in a relaxed tone, completely ignoring how disheartened he was and how he gave up everything to come to this village. Good. You can live a few more years than me. Remember to visit me on my grave every year." "I'm afraid of loneliness," the old woman said with a trembling voice and tears in her eyes. "Okay," Chang Tian replied with a simple word. After the old woman passed away, he moved to her grave and guarded her every day so that she wouldn't be lonely. The old woman sized up everything in the courtyard as if she wanted to imprint the entire place where this old man had lived for decades in her heart. She sorted out her emotions and said, "This time, I'm here to invite you out of the mountain." "I'm not interested in those things anymore," Chang Tian replied faintly. The Empress of Dayo, the fifth most powerful expert in the world, Qi Zixiao. She's currently in Tianjin Basin, the old woman said. Upon hearing this, Chang Tian's expression finally changed, and the faint smile on his face disappeared. How many people? There's only her and 2 servants who are merely at the peak of the man-wheel level. Who else is going to make a move? Including your 17 spirit wheel experts and all the earth wheel experts in Tianjing Basin. The young girl beside the old woman turned to look at her master with her mouth wide open. Weren't there only 13 famous spirit wheel experts in Tianjing Basin? Including the people in front of him, there were only 14. Good. After I finish pasting this umbrella, I'll follow you down the mountain. This umbrella is what I promised, and I can't make half of it. As the old man spoke, he held the paper umbrella in his hand again. Even if he had let go of everything, there were still some things that he couldn't let go. It wasn't for himself, but for the millions of people in Tianjing Basin. One day later, 3 figures stood at the entrance of the valley and turned to look back. More than 10 villagers were standing not far behind the 3 of them. They were holding a bundle in their hands. Haha, Qi Xiao, the 5th most powerful expert in the world, who dares to say that they will come back alive? The middle-aged man laughed. Then, he hesitated for a moment before slowly placing his hand on the young man's head and touching it. This was the first time he had touched the young man's head like this since he was 5 years old. Father! The young man's eyes were a little red. Sissy! The middle-aged man couldn't bear to see him like this and scolded. A few women wearing helmets and armor behind him immediately glared at him. Let's go! Let's go! The middle-aged man said in a deep voice. The North Alliance. Many of the cavalrymen in front straightened their bodies and shouted. Southern Metropolis, Green Bellflower, Lingshan Sect, Mangsing Pavilion, Nine-Blade Sect, Death Toad Sect. Whether they were famous or not, whether they were well-known sects in Tianjing Basin or gangs that were looked down upon by the people, whether they were the higher-ups of the 3 major powers or the elders living in seclusion in the mountains. Chapter 453. Rinpochian sat in the courtyard in a daze. The sound of wood being sawed could be heard not far from him. Zhang Kaixian was playing the eru happily, and her face was blooming with happiness. Lin Xiaola was sleeping on the wall. Yes, on top of the wall. Bang! Every time this sound was heard, Lin Xiaola would fall off the wall and climb back up drowsily. According to her, the room was too quiet, and the sound of sawing disturbed her sleep. She simply ran outside. Although it was noisier, the noise of people on the street made the sawing sound less prominent, and she could fall asleep this way. The city that Rinpochian was in was called Ming City, and it was located in the center of Tianjing Basin. He came with the people from the hidden village. Before they arrived, the nearby sect had already gathered here. There are dozens of earth wheel experts and 1 spirit wheel expert. This was only the surrounding area. After his group arrived, more people arrived in succession over the past 2 days. Rinpochian couldn't help but worry when he thought of what he heard. All the experts in Tianjing Basin were rushing here. Now, the Empress had really become the big boss. The current situation was equivalent to all the guilds and individual players in the entire server forming a team to defeat the world boss. Rinpochian had participated twice when he was playing games and felt that it was pretty cool and hot-blooded, especially with the background music, which made people's adrenaline soar. Looking at everyone's fighting spirit and thinking about how the world boss was his fiancée, Rinpochian cursed in his heart. If he had a slightly more reliable person, he would have sent him to deliver a letter to Gu City. However, Lin Xiaola, Rinpochian was afraid that she would fall asleep halfway. The hot weather coupled with the ear-piercing sawing sound made Rinpochian a little impatient. He stood up, walked around the courtyard twice, threw a piece of white rabbit creamy candy at Lin Xiaola, informed Zhang Kaixian, and walked out of the courtyard. After he walked out, he turned his head to take a look. Sure enough, Lin Xiaola was following him silently. Who do you think will win? Rinpochian couldn't help but ask. He had already asked this question many times. Lin Xiaola replied with the same sentence. Don't you already have a guess? But you are an expert, so you have better foresight and know more than me. If it were me, I would at most be able to face 3 spirit wheel experts. If there were any more, I would have to run. However, I will bring you along when I escape, so don't worry. In any case, Lin Shala still remembered that he was her owner. However, this wasn't what he was worried about. Rinpoche stopped talking and shifted his gaze to the four old men who looked the same, except for the mole near their mouths that was in a different position. The four of them noticed his gaze and smiled amiably. They then glanced at Lin Shala and brushed past the two of them. Rinpoche looked back and saw that the four of them were heading in the direction of the warlord's residence, which was now the headquarters of many experts. He had never seen these four people before, so they must be experts who had just arrived. With each passing day, the number of experts in the city would increase. The streets were very lively. Warriors with weapons could be seen from time to time, and all of them were metal weapons. "Brother below, would you like to come up for a drink?" Rinpoche heard the shout above him and looked up. He saw a man leaning on the window of the second floor of a shop next to him, looking in his direction with a smile on his face. Rinpoche looked to his left and right and heard the man shout, "Brother from the Yun Nation, would you like to come up for a drink?" Rinpoche then confirmed that he was indeed called. He thought for a while and walked up to the second floor. This was a restaurant, and there weren't many people at this time. A young man in his 20s stood by the window on the second floor. He was very good-looking, gave off a sincere feeling when he smiled, and was dressed in embroidered clothes. He was the young man who called out to Rinpoche just now. Seeing the two of them come up, he cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, brother. Greetings, senior." "You know me?" Rinpoche asked. "Mr. Yi Yunxian, or should I say, Principal Run, would you like to sit down and have a chat?" Rinpoche's mind buzzed at the young man's words. An uncontrollable murderous intent emerged from the bottom of his heart as he coldly said, "Kill him." It never crossed his mind that the other party was trying to trick him. This was because ordinary people would never imagine that the so-called guest from the Yun Nation would actually be the husband chosen by the Empress. Furthermore, the other party directly said that he would be the principal. It was obvious that the other party knew a lot of things. As soon as Rinpoche finished speaking, she transformed into a gust of wind and pounced at the man by the window. "Wait, it's not an enemy." The young man on the other side swayed a few times before flipping over and jumping out of the window. However, in less than 3 seconds, he crashed through the window with a claw mark on his face and fell back in. Without saying a word, Rinpoche took out his gun, raised his hand, and fired 3 shots at the other party's head. "We're not enemies. Let's work together," the young man shouted as he flipped over and dodged Rinpoche's gun. "Stop!" Rinpoche hesitated for a while and finally spoke up. He wanted to hear what Rinpoche had to say. Seeing that Lin Shala had returned to his side, the man heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment, the young man wasn't as calm as before. His body was covered in wood shavings, his hair was disheveled, and his face was covered in claw marks. He was so close to getting his head smashed open by Lin Shala. The young man took a few deep breaths and threw an ingot of silver to the innkeeper, who ran over after hearing the noise as compensation. He then smiled bitterly and said, "It's really dangerous to deal with Principal Run. Your skills are not bad." Rinpoche praised insincerely. Speaking of which, this person's skills weren't bad. The difference in strength between a spirit wheel expert and an earth wheel expert was like heaven and earth. Previously, when Rinpoche was attacked in Lan City, the Earth Wheel Guard commander was killed in an instant when the other party suddenly attacked and used a heaven-grade weapon. Although this was due to the sudden attack and the use of a heaven-grade weapon, Lin Shala was much more skilled than the assassin from before. Even a spirit wheel expert like Qin Yun's sword wasn't her match. It was already amazing that this young man could withstand at least 2 blows from her without dying. In addition, the other party wasn't even 30 years old. Presumably, among the younger generation, besides people like the Empress and Li Yuanzhu, he could be considered one of the best. The young man sat down at the table next to him, and Rinpoche followed suit. After the other party took out a bottle and applied some medicinal powder to his face, the wound on his face began to heal quickly. However, the newly regenerated skin was still a little tender, and the scratch marks could still be seen. "Who are you?" Rinpoche calmed down and asked faintly, "You should have heard that someone from Great Xia is also here." The young man laughed and didn't seem to be affected by the life and death experience just now. If it was someone else who almost lost their life just now, they wouldn't be able to calm down even if they wanted to cooperate with you. Just based on his temperament. He wasn't an ordinary person. "It's you." Rinpoche was surprised. He didn't expect the other party to be sent by Great Xia and know his identity. However, he kept saying that he wanted to cooperate with him, and he didn't know what he meant. "Principal Run, you can call me Su Qing. How did you recognize me?" Rinpoche asked. This was what he wanted to know the most at the moment. "I've seen the Seventh Prince, and happen to know that Principal Run and the Seventh Prince look exactly the same." The young man smiled. Rinpoche suddenly realized that this was where the problem lay. "I didn't expect Principal Run to change your identity and become a citizen of a Yun nation to infiltrate the headquarters of the Secret Alliance. I think it isn't a coincidence that the Empress of Dayo appeared here. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.